Chapter 939. The strength of Chu Xiu's killing intent was something that village master Feng and the rest could not imagine at all. Previously, they were prepared to talk nonsense with Chu Xiu here to delay the time and wait for the people from Chunyang Dao sect to arrive. In the end, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would not even give them a chance to speak and would kill them directly? Seeing that the martial artists from Jianghu Hall were already rushing towards them with swords and sabers in their hands, even village master Feng, who could still pretend to be calm, had turned pale. At this moment, a low shout suddenly came. "Wait!" Scorching pure yang qi swept over, and the disciples of Chunyang Dao sect blocked in front of them. Seeing that the people from Chunyang Dao sect had finally arrived, village master Feng and the rest were so excited that they were about to cry. They covered their chests and heaved a sigh of relief. This kind of ups and downs between life and death was too exciting. They could not take it if it happened a few more times. Looking at the people from Chunyang Dao sect, Chu Xiu sneered. "A few days ago, I just had a fierce battle with Great Guangming Temple. I did not expect that it would be Chunyang Dao sect's turn again today. Do all of you think that I, Chu Xiu, am easy to bully, and everyone wants to step on me?" Shi Yunzi glared at village master Feng and the rest and sighed. "If I said that I really did not know about this matter, would you believe me?" Chu Xiu asked in return, "Do you think I would believe you?" Shi Yunzi spread his hands and said, "So, in the end, we still have to fight. My Chunyang Dao sect really does not want to fight with you at this time. Can't you let these people go?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Those who break the rules must die." Mako Mori stepped forward and said with a smile, "There's no need to say so much. If people like Chu Xiu could be easily persuaded, he wouldn't be Chu Xiu. Let's see who's the real deal." Suddenly, Shi Yunzi stopped Mako Mori. He spat out a mouthful of blood onto the pure yang sword in his hand and handed it over to Mako Mori. In the entire Chunyang Dao sect, Shi Yunzi was the only one who could perfectly use the divine weapon's pure yang. Right now, his blood essence was attached to the pure yang, allowing Mako Mori to temporarily use the pure yang for a period of time. Mako Mori said with a faint smile, "You don't believe in your martial uncle's strength?" Shi Yunzi shook his head and said, "Of course I do, but this Chu Xiu has too many trump cards, we have to be careful." He remembered that during the last great war between the righteous and demonic sects, Ling Yunzi could not defeat Chu Xiu even though he was half a step into the mystic illuminating realm. Although the others did not know that Chu Xiu was actually on the verge of death at that time, Chu Xiu's powerful strength still left a deep impression on Shi Yunzi. Although Mako Mori was a powerhouse of the previous generation, combat power had nothing to do with age. Only God knew how big a breakthrough he had made after so many years of closed-door cultivation. To be safe, it was better to take the pure yang divine weapon first. Mako Mori took the pure yang divine weapon, and a look of reminiscence suddenly appeared in his eyes. The pure yang divine weapon of the Chunyang Dao sect had protected the Chunyang Dao sect for so many years, but there were not many people who were qualified to use the pure yang in every generation. In the previous generation of the Chunyang Dao sect, only one person could use the pure yang. That person used the pure yang sword to teach them, the disobedient junior fellow apprentices, a lesson. The look of reminiscence only lasted for a moment before it disappeared. Now was not the time to reminisce. Looking at Chu Xiu, Mako Mori said lightly, "Ling Yunzi actually suffered a loss in your hands. It's really unexpected. I'm also a person who is about to die. I didn't expect that I can still meet the most outstanding young man of this generation. It's a blessing." In the past, when Mako Mori was not in closed-door cultivation, Ling Yunzi was already famous in the Chunyang Dao sect. He was even an outstanding figure who was famous in the entire underworld. In the entire Chunyang Dao sect, he was the only one who was qualified to be the headmaster. As a result, in the hands of this Chu Xiu, Ling Yunzi suffered a loss. He couldn't defeat Chu Xiu with all his strength. This really surprised Mako Mori, especially when the opponent's current realm was strictly speaking, just the real pellet state. Of course, for Chu Xiu, the realm could no longer be used to measure him. Looking at Mako Mori, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Younger generation? Actually, I don't like someone imposing such a symbol on me. The underworld is the underworld. Whether it is the new generation or the old generation, who doesn't fight in this underworld? I have experienced the younger generation of the underworld, and I can also compete with the older generation of the underworld. Since we are all mingling in this underworld, no one will respect the old and love the young. In that case, why do we care about the younger generation and the older generation? In this underworld, there is no big or small, only victory or defeat is important." Mako Mori laughed and said, "Only victory or defeat is important. I have lived for hundreds of years, but I didn't expect that I can't see it as clearly as a junior like you. But it doesn't matter. It's not like I haven't lost in my life. I'm about to die. It doesn't matter if I win or lose. I'm not afraid of others saying that I'm bullying the young." As Mako Mori's voice fell, the next moment, the divine weapon Pure Yang in his hand suddenly bloomed with a dazzling brilliance. In the sky and on the ground, everything was shrouded by the brilliance of this sword. It was as if the sun had descended, and all the evil in the world were crushed and obliterated. Seeing this scene, Chu Xiu's heart suddenly shuddered, and at the same time, he secretly thought that he was lucky. A weapon was a weapon after all. Only a person who was strong enough could exert the effect of the weapon itself. The Pure Yang sword in the hands of Shi Yunzi was indeed very strong, but it could only reach the peak of the real pellet state. But now that the Pure Yang sword was in the hands of Mako Mori, although it couldn't exert its full power, its power was shocking enough. When Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi fought in the past, it was a battle between the righteous and demonic factions. It wasn't just the victory or defeat between Chu Xiu and Ling Yunzi. Therefore, in order to maximize its power, Ling Yunzi didn't forcibly use the Pure Yang sword. Instead, he handed it over to Shi Yunzi, making Shi Yunzi a strong combat power. Last time, if Ling Yunzi was like Mako Mori now and temporarily controlled the Pure Yang sword with the power of Shi Yunzi's blood essence, although Chu Xiu wouldn't be defeated so quickly, he definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for so long. At this time, Mako Mori was holding the divine weapon Pure Yang tightly. The familiar power reminded him of those familiar people in the past. He shook his head with a wry smile. He was old, and even in battle, he couldn't concentrate. But with his age, this battle would probably be his last, right? As this thought flashed through his mind, Mako Mori slashed down with his sword, and the Pure Yang energy that filled the sky suddenly condensed into a line. The golden line didn't look like sword chi, but wherever it passed, the heat caused the space to distort. The heavenly Dao war case in Chu Xiu's hand instantly condensed into the peerless heavenly blade. He slashed out with the sea-cleaving slash, and a violent and turbulent power stirred up the power of heaven and earth, going straight for the sword. Now, when Chu Xiu attacked, his martial arts leaned toward suppressing his opponent with brute force. No matter how many variations there were, he could still break them with brute force. This kind of martial arts was easy to say, but it was difficult to do. After all, in the pugilistic world, it was almost impossible to find a second warrior like Chu Xiu, who had accumulated such power at the same level as him. In the face of the sword that had the power to shatter mountains and break seas, the silk line on Mako Mori's sword began to twist strangely, and it coiled. The Pure Yang sword chi of extreme yang, in the hands of Mako Mori, showed a strange kind of gentleness. The golden sword chi was like a silk line, and in an instant, it had directly strangled the power of Chu Xiu's sword. Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed. This Mako Mori had probably found another path in the martial arts of the Chunyang Dao sect. The combination of hardness and softness, the pure yang energy of extreme yang, was actually used by him to feel feminine, but the power was on a higher level. The slender but scorching pure yang energy of extreme yang wrapped around Chu Xiu. Almost in an instant, the area of 100 feet around Chu Xiu was enveloped by the scorching sword silk. The pure yang energy was so hot that it even melted the surrounding soil, and the power could be said to be extremely domineering. The two completely different powers, one hard and one soft, gathered in one body, and the power was extremely terrifying. Being in the middle of the scorching pure yang energy, Chu Xiu's expression did not change at all. He formed a seal with both hands, and in the next moment, the sun-changing technique was performed. The Dharma form of Vairocana, which also carried a scorching Buddhist light, appeared behind him. The majestic Buddhist light shone, and Vairocana put his palms together. A strange Buddhist voice was uttered, but in the next moment, the Buddhist flame that could suppress evil and kill demons turned into an extremely evil world-destroying fire. Vairocana evolved into the great darkness Mahakala, and two more arms grew behind him, completely tearing the sword silk apart. Mako Mori's expression changed slightly. He had never seen such an evil power before. It was similar to Devil Chi, but it was definitely not Devil Chi. Most importantly, this power actually evolved from the Buddhist light. Could it be that it was invented by those monks? To be able to research such a power, it was unlikely that they were good monks. At this moment, Chu Xiu had already formed a seal with both hands, and a longbow made of Devil Chi appeared in the middle of the Mahakala devil god's Dharma form behind him. With one arm holding the bow and the other three on the bowstring, the triple city extinguishing arrow, which was burning with world-destroying fire, shot out with a loud bang. Everywhere it passed, even the essence chi of the world was evaporated by the world-destroying fire on the arrow. Feeling the power in the arrow, Mako Mori's figure retreated hurriedly. He was old, and his physical strength, inner force, and vital energy were not at their peak. Against a young man like Chu Xiu, whose essence, chi, and spirit were all at their peak, he was actually at a disadvantage. Therefore, in the face of this evil arrow, Mako Mori's first reaction was to dodge. However, at the moment he dodged, an even more mysterious power enveloped his entire body. In fact, before he could even take a step, the triple city extinguishing arrow had already locked onto him. From the moment that Chu Xiu's arrow was released, it had already locked onto Mako Mori's entire body that could be dodged. Chapter 940. The heaven sun gazing at air mystic technique was a perfect match for the triple city extinguishing arrow. At the very least, as long as the opponent's strength could not suppress Chu Xiu, it was basically impossible for them to escape the heaven sun gazing at air deduction. Mako Mori recalled the number of times he had to dodge. Seeing that he could no longer dodge, the pure yang sword in his hand emitted a scorching glow. With the sword in his right hand, he formed a Dao seal with his left hand. Pure yang suppressed evil, slaying demons with his sword. The pure yang sword clashed with the triple annihilation city arrow. The black power of nirvanic extermination and the scorching pure yang astral chi burst out. Within a radius of a few hundred feet, the vegetation instantly withered, and any vitality was wiped out. Following that, the scorching pure yang power spread like magma, causing the soil and rocks to melt. Manor Lord Feng and company, who had provoked this matter, turned pale. It was only at this moment that they realized exactly how stupid of a thing they had done. Be it the Chunyang Dao sects Mako Mori or Chu Xiu, both of them stood at the pinnacle of the pugilistic world. They were like gods or Buddhas. Yet, he had used his own schemes to speculate on them. He was dancing on the tip of a knife, with a sea of fire beneath him. After the triple city extinguishing arrow clashed with the pure yang sword, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. For the first time, the triple city extinguishing arrow had lost its effect. Although the power of nirvanic extermination was extremely domineering, Ancestor Lu's divine weapon, the pure yang, had a power that was likely left behind by Ancestor Lu. It had directly neutralized the power of nirvanic extermination of the triple city extinguishing arrow, preventing it from spreading. Furthermore, after exchanging a few blows, he had already sensed that the old Daoist, Mako Mori, had lived for such a long time. His strength was actually far inferior to Ling Yunzi's. Even the current Chu Xiu could match the old Daoist, Mako Mori, in terms of pure strength. However, having lived for so long, he had actually cultivated the Chunyang Dao sect's incomparably ferocious pure yang astral qi to the point where it was both hard and soft. It was extremely difficult to deal with. Chu Xiu wasn't afraid of his opponent, but he wasn't sure if he could take him down. Moreover, Chu Xiu could guarantee that at this time, there were definitely people from the Great Guangming Temple watching from the sidelines. They could not wait for both sides to fight to the death. As Chu Xiu continued to fight with Mako Mori, he said to Mei Qinglian, "Do it. Destroy these few families. Leave no one alive." He was only here to kill, not to determine a victor with the pure Yang Dao sect. However, Shi Yunzi and the others were naturally prepared. Although there were not many people from Chunyang Dao sect who came this time, they were all elites. It would be an exaggeration to use these people to fight against the Jianghu Hall, but it was still enough to block Mei Qinglian and the others. While resisting, Shi Yunzi said, "Official Chu, where it is possible to forgive people, one should forgive them. I also hate that these people are brainless, but there is still the Great Guangming Temple watching from the sidelines. Do you really have to fight to the death with my Chunyang Dao sect? How about this, both of us take a step back. You let them go once, and I will let them make up for the offerings. What do you think?" As Chu Xiu attacked, he said coldly, "Take a step back? If my Jianghu Hall takes a step back, it will be difficult for us to go further in the future. The Jianghu Hall will not compromise, nor will we give in. Some rules must be followed. The price of violating them is death." Shi Yunzi furrowed his brows. He had always known that Chu Xiu could be said to be a very tough person. It was not that easy to make him take a step back. However, the problem was that if Chu Xiu did not take a step back, was it worth it for the Chunyang Dao sect to fight to the death with Chu Xiu here? However, if they took the initiative to retreat, the reputation of Chunyang Dao sect in the northern Yen would be completely ruined. At the very least, they would not be able to compete with the Great Guangming Temple. Just as Shi Yunzi was in a dilemma, there was a movement in the distance. Everyone looked over and saw that it was Tangya leading a group of people from the northern Yen Jianghu sections. Of course, looking at their appearance, most of them were unwilling. They were forced to come here by Tangya and the others. Shi Yunzi was stunned. He did not know what Chu Xiu wanted to do. However, at this time, Chu Xiu broke away from the battle and retreated more than 100 feet. He said coldly to the people from the northern Yen forces, "The Feng clan and the others did not respect the rules of the Jianghu Hall. They should be punished. I am very pleased that you did not collude with the Feng clan and the others. Therefore, I will give you a chance to eliminate the Feng clan and the other forces. Those who take action will be exempted from a year's tribute." Hearing this, Shi Yunzi and the people from the Chunyang Dao sect were so angry that they almost vomited blood. No one expected Chu Xiu to have such a trick up his sleeve. He actually encouraged other forces from the northern Yen Jianghu world to take action against Villa Master Feng and the others. In fact, before coming here, Chu Xiu had thought that even if the Chunyang Dao sect really did not know about this matter concerned the reputation of the Chunyang Dao sect, so they would definitely take action. At that time, Chu Xiu still did not know how strong Mako Mori was. If he was weak, then he would directly eliminate the Chunyang Dao sect and eliminate those few families. But if Mako Mori could stop him, then it was time for the others to play a role. Therefore, he secretly asked Tangya to bring this group of people here as a precaution. Seeing this, Shi Yunzi hurriedly shouted to those people, "You listened to Chu Xiu's order to kill the northern Yen Jianghu people. Have you never thought that one day, you will also be killed by others?" Even if there was the temptation of Chu Xiu waiving a year's tribute, the people present were still a little hesitant. The reason for their hesitation was also what Shi Yunzi said, "The fox grieves when the rabbit dies." Today, Villa Master Feng and the others provoked Chu Xiu and ended up in such a situation. If they provoked Chu Xiu in the future, they would probably also end up in such a situation. Seeing these people hesitating, Chu Xiu said coldly, "You don't want to take action? Well, you don't want to take action." This time, with the Chunyang Dao sect protecting the Feng family village and the other forces, the Jianghu Hall can't destroy them. After that, the Jianghu Hall will destroy you. If you don't want the people of the Feng family village to die, then you will be the ones to die. Anyway, someone broke the rules of the Jianghu Hall, and someone has to pay with their life. As soon as this statement came out, everyone present was stunned. They looked at Chu Xiu with disbelief. They had never seen such a shameless person. It was said that when the city gate was on fire, the fish in the moat would also be affected. However, they were far away from the city gate, so what did it have to do with them? Moreover, they believed that Chu Xiu would definitely do such a shameless thing. Therefore, the forces present gritted their teeth and immediately rushed to kill Villa Master Feng and the others. The people of the Chunyang Dao sect could stop the Jianghu Hall, but how could they have the strength to stop the other forces? Moreover, even if they could stop them, how could they take action? After all, the Chunyang Dao sect still wanted to preach in the Northern Yen sect. Therefore, everyone could only watch the Feng family village and the other forces connected with it being torn into pieces. In less than a quarter of an hour, the entire Feng family village was covered in blood. Villa Master Feng and the others were in despair. They didn't even resist and just let the killing happen. Originally, when they saw Chu Xiu coming, they were in despair once. Later, when the Chunyang Dao sect came, they had hope again. As a result, the Chunyang Dao sect didn't stop Chu Xiu, and the people of the other Northern Yen forces began to kill again. This immediately made them fall into despair. After going up and down several times, they were scared to death even if they weren't killed. They would still be killed if they stretched out their heads, so they might as well end it quickly. The entire Feng family village and the other forces were slaughtered. The people of the Chunyang Dao sect had stopped and didn't stop the Jianghu Hall anymore. They were already dead, so what was the point of stopping them? Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori looked gloomy. It was the first time they saw someone as ruthless as Chu Xiu. Mako Mori suddenly laughed and said, "Ruthless. Vicious. It's a pity that you were born in the wrong era. If you were born 500 years ago, I'm afraid no one would be able to stop you." 500 years ago, the Kunlun devil cult dominated the Jianghu. At that time, no matter how ruthless and vicious Chu Xiu was, there was no trouble. On the contrary, he would be put in an important position by the Kunlun devil cult. However, now was not the time for the diabolism to dominate the Jianghu. The Jianghu was dominated by the righteous sects. Mako Mori's meaning was obvious. Chu Xiu was arrogant and overbearing now, but the current Jianghu wouldn't tolerate him forever. Chu Xiu didn't care about the meaning of Mako Mori's words. He just said lightly, "There's no need to do it 500 years ago. The current era is good enough." Whether it was Mako Mori or Shi Yunzi, they didn't have the leisure to argue with Chu Xiu here. He had been killed by Chu Xiu. They were definitely going to lose face. However, just like the time at the Great Guangming Temple, they couldn't fight a desperate battle with Chu Xiu now. Of course, the Chunyang Dao sect was stronger than the Great Guangming Temple because they had already recruited the disciples they wanted. As long as the disciples in these families met the requirements, they were all gathered in the Chunyang Dao sect's branch at the moment. Therefore, they managed to escape the disaster. Although it would definitely be a huge blow if they knew about this matter, it would be a good thing if some disciples could work harder to cultivate and motivate themselves under this kind of hatred. Therefore, seeing that everyone was dead, the Chunyang Dao sect could only leave helplessly. After returning to the Jianghu Hall, Chu Xiu asked people to spread this matter throughout the northern Yen Jianghu. After making an example out of others, he began to have a headache. After offending the Great Guangming Temple once and the Chunyang Dao sect again, Chu Xiu didn't suffer any losses. However, not suffering 2 losses did not mean that he wouldn't suffer losses in the future. The Great Guangming Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect kept stirring up trouble back and forth. Chu Xiu couldn't ignore it as it consumed his own energy. More importantly, the Jianghu Hall originally had the authority in the northern Jianghu. In the end, the Great Guangming Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect kept stirring up trouble back and forth, which would also affect the reputation of the Jianghu Hall. Originally, Chu Xiu planned to wait until the problem with the northern Yan royal family was solved before dealing with these 2 factions. However, it seemed that some plans needed to be changed now. After thinking about it for 2 days, Chu Xiu had a more reliable plan. However, this plan didn't need him to carry it out. Instead, it needed a bold and careful young martial artist. Chapter 941. Why did the Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple come to the northern Yan? To put it simply, they were not here to expand their influence, but to look for suitable disciples. The Great Light Temple had always been strict in their selection of disciples, so even with their reputation, there were not many disciples that could catch the eye of the Great Light Temple. Moreover, even if some disciples were chosen by the Great Light Temple and had their tongues shaved, after entering the Great Light Temple, they would need to be a novice monk for a period of time. They would not be taught martial arts, but would need to recite Buddhist scriptures and train their bodies. Only after passing would they be selected by the 3 great Zen halls or the 6 great martial academies based on their performance. Although the younger generation of the Chunyang Dao sect was lacking in talent, so they had relaxed their standards, but not everyone could join them. Just look at the disciples that the Chunyang Dao sect had selected in the northern Yan during this period of time. Almost all of them were the more outstanding among the young people of the loose cultivators, or the disciples of the major forces who performed well. Therefore, compared to the Great Light Temple, the Chunyang Dao sect actually cared more about these disciples and successors. Since that was the case, Chu Xiu would give them a disciple, a genius disciple, that would make them ecstatic. Although it seemed that Chu Xiu's trick was the same as sending Daoist Wuyang to Xiang Chang's side, in reality, it was much more difficult than the former. Daoist Wuyang was an old fox, and with Xiang Chang's current situation, it was easy to fool him. However, the pure Yang Taoism sect was not something that Xiang Chong could compare to. Although Shi Yunzi looked like he was joking around and was a little unreliable, he was not someone to be trifled with. There was also that old monster, Shou Zhenzi. Therefore, the most important thing about this matter was that the person who came to execute it had to be extremely cautious. If this was before Chu Xiu became famous, he would have the guts to do this, but now, there were not many young people around him who could do this. After thinking for a long time, Chu Xiu finally thought of a suitable person to do this. This person was his cheap disciple, or rather, his half-successor, Yi Xiao. Yi Xiao's growth was witnessed by Chu Xiu. Even his current personality was deliberately seduced by Chu Xiu, and nurtured. Back then, he had been a spy for Sun Zhongming for such a long time, so he already had experience. Now that he was in the hands of the Chunyang Dao sect, although it was a little more difficult, Yi Xiao was no longer the Yi Xiao from before. Right now, Yi Xiao was working as a hitman in the Azure Dragon Society's headquarters. He had Duanmu Qianshan's guidance, and he didn't lack any cultivation resources. On top of that, he was able to fight and kill on a regular basis. Yi Xiao had already stepped into the 5 energies origin stage, which was considered very advanced for someone his age. After Chu Xiu made his choice, he immediately notified the Blue Dragon Society and told them to bring Yi Xiao over. A month later, the people from the Blue Dragon Society had already arrived. Moreover, not only Yi Xiao, but Mu Zi had also come. Along with them were Han Lei, Song Shao, and hundreds of elite assassins from the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters. Chu Xiu said in surprise, "I only asked Yi Xiao to come. Why did you bring so many people?" Mu Zi said softly, "Foster father said that young master is currently in trouble. The Blue Dragon Society's assassins may not be of much use in the light, but they are very useful in dealing with secret matters or gathering intelligence in the dark." Speaking up to this point, Mu Zi also secretly sized up Mei Qinglian with some hostility in her eyes. She wouldn't say that she was worried that young Master Chu would be bewitched by that demoness every day and that she was jealous, so she begged Duanwu Qianshan to bring people over. Mei Qinglian also felt Mu Zi's gaze, but she smiled disdainfully. Coming from the Yin Demon sect, what hasn't she seen before? Mu Zi is still too young. Her status is too low, to the point that I can't bear to bully her. Chu Xiu didn't pay attention to the confrontation between the two women. Of course, he didn't have the time to pay attention. He directly said, "You came at the right time. The Blue Dragon Society's branches will be spread throughout the northern Yan region, mainly to monitor the movements of the Buddhist and Daoist sections. Yi Shao, come with me." Following behind Chu Xiu, Yi Shao was also very excited. To be honest, although Chu Xiu taught him many things, he didn't expect to become Chu Xiu's personal disciple. However, even if it was just teaching him, it would be enough for Yi Shao to live a comfortable life in the Blue Dragon Society. However, people are ambitious, and Yi Shao was the same. Previously, when he was bullied in the Yi family, Yi Shao's dream was to one day live with dignity. But now, Yi Shao only had one dream, and that was to stand out. To stand out, he didn't rely on his mouth, but on his fists and knives. Chu Xiu had taught Yi Shao a lot of things. However, what Yi Shao truly remembered was that in this world of martial arts, power, fame, and even freedom were not given by others. Instead, they were fought for with the weapons in their hands. Therefore, in the headquarters of the Blue Dragon Society, Yi Shao could clearly rely on Chu Xiu's legacy to live a comfortable life, but he still trained with all his might and went on missions with all his might. That kind of desperation made even veteran assassins like Han Cry and Song Shao shudder. This kid seemed to be born to kill, and if he didn't go on a mission for a day, his whole body would feel uncomfortable. In fact, Yi Shao didn't like missions, nor did he like killing people. At his current age, the fastest way to increase his cultivation wasn't through pills, nor was it through closed-door training, but through life and death battles. This time, when he received news from Chu Xiu, Yi Shao was ecstatic. He had finally made it to the point where Chu Xiu needed him. As long as he could appear in front of Chu Xiu, Yi Shao was confident that he could complete any mission that Chu Xiu gave him. Time was of the essence, so Chu Xiu didn't waste any more words with Yi Shao. He just asked, "Do you understand the situation in the northern Yan?" Yi Shao nodded. "I almost know. The northern Yan Emperor Xiang Long burned the bridge after crossing the river, bringing in the Buddhist and Daoist sects to suppress you. Who did you send me here to kill this time?" Chu Xiu waved his hand. "This time, I didn't send you to kill someone. If you really want to kill someone, don't be fooled by the fact that you've trained in the Blue Dragon Society for so long. My subordinates are much more agile than you. This time, not only am I not sending you to kill someone, but I'm also preparing to send you to the side of the Chunyang Dao sect, making you the most important disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect." Yi Shao nodded and said, "Understood. I often used this tactic when I was in the Azure Dragon Association. When I encounter a difficult target, there are many people around to protect me, so I think of a way to change my identity and mix in with them, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate them." Chu Xiu slapped his forehead. This kid had been in the Blue Dragon Society for too long, and it seemed like he was used to it. Everything that came to him, the ultimate goal was to kill someone. This wasn't good. Killing someone was just a means to achieve the goal, not the main goal. Wrong. I sent you to the Chunyang Dao sect not to kill the people of the Chunyang Dao sect, but to kill the people of the Great Light Temple. Chu Xiu pointed at Yi Shao and said, "You must use the identity of the Chunyang Dao sect to kill the people of the Great Light Temple. I'm almost done with the arrangements here in the northern Yan, but the Buddhist and Daoist sects keep giving me trouble from time to time. If I don't get rid of them first, they might cause more trouble for me. However, because of my existence, the Buddhist and Daoist sects can't really fight to the death. Now, the Daoist, Buddhist, and demon sects are attacking each other. We're wary of each other, but we're also enduring each other. In the end, the three of us will still be the ones to exhaust our strength. It had to be said that Xiang Long's plan was already half successful. He had attracted the Daoist, Buddhist, and demon sects. The three sects were hostile toward each other, but they were also wary of each other. Even if all three sects were restraining themselves, there was no lack of conflicts. In less than 3 months, Chu Xiu had already fought a battle with the Great Light Temple and attacked the Chunyang Dao sect. Moreover, this was just a grudge between Chu Xiu and the two sections. The Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple had already clashed several times. The Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect were both here for their disciples, and the first step for them to choose their disciples was to look at their potential. If their potential and talent were up to standard, then they could check if their temperament was up to standard. Therefore, it was inevitable that both sides would have their eyes on the same disciple at the same time. Naturally, it was easy for conflicts to arise. If Chu Xiu still did not think of a way to break the balance between the three sects, just the battle with the Buddhist and Daoist sects here would exhaust a lot of his energy. Yi Shao was not stupid. Chu Xiu's plan was not complicated, so he guessed it immediately. He immediately said, "Sir, what you mean is that you want to use me as a key point to trigger a battle between the Buddhist and Daoist sects, so that both sides will suffer?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's what I mean. However, it sounds simple, but it's very difficult to do. First of all, you must receive enough attention from the pure Yang Daoist sect. Then, after you kill the people from the Great Light Temple, the pure Yang Daoist sect will protect you to the death, and even fight with the Great Light Temple for you. You know very well what this means. The Chunyang Dao sect came to the northern Yen to preach, to recruit disciples, and to make up for the current situation of the Chunyang Dao sect's lack of talent. Therefore, the value you need to display is that you alone are comparable to all the young disciples in the land of northern Yen. Only by doing so will you be able to make the Chunyang Daoist sect disregard everything to protect you and fight to the death against the Temple of Great Light. Also, you have to completely anger the martial arts practitioners of the Great Light Temple, so that they will kill you as soon as possible. In short, this task is very difficult, and also very dangerous. If your identity is known to the Chunyang Dao sect, the Chunyang Dao sect will definitely be furious. They will not care about my face, and you will almost certainly die. And when you attack the Great Light Temple, if you are not careful, you will easily die in the hands of the Great Light Temple monks. This dangerous task is not something that can be forced, so I will give you a chance to choose. After the task is done, I will give you 3 positions. One of the dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society. Of course, with your strength, you can only be ranked last. The torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room. After you take over, you will have the greatest power. The chief deacon of the Jianghu Hall, your position is equivalent to Tangya, Yan Bugui, Pang Hu, and the others. Life or power, it's your choice. Chapter 942. Chu Xiu was not a man who liked to talk about principles. The reason why his men followed him was very simple. It was not for some illusory hope, ideals, or bullshit*t. It was very simple. If you follow me, you will have meat to eat. As long as you followed Chu Xiu, these things were at your fingertips. So until now, there had not been any rebellions or dissatisfaction among Chu Xiu's men. As long as you had the strength and dared to fight, Chu Xiu could give you whatever you wanted. Why would you be dissatisfied? As for those who did not dare to fight, but complained that they followed Chu Xiu and did not get any benefits, such people were no different from trash. Naturally, they would be eliminated. Even if such trash really rebelled, they would still be trash and would not be able to cause any trouble. The mission this time was indeed dangerous. Even when Chu Xiu was young, he had to plan for a long period of time and only do it after he was 80% confident. Now, he asked Yi Xiao to do it because he was indeed the most suitable one. Almost all the young martial artists under Chu Xiu were famous in Jianghu. Even people like Tang Ye and Yan Bugui were very famous in the northern Yan land. And those who knew Yi Xiao's identity had almost all been killed. The Yi family was gone, and so were the Sun family and the Lu family. Who knew Yi Xiao's real identity? When the Blue Dragon Society assassins carried out a mission, they all wore masks. Yi Xiao's identity was very well hidden. He was now a blank piece of paper. Chu Xiu could write anything he wanted. Facing Chu Xiu's gaze, Yi Xiao did not even think and said directly, "I am willing to accept this mission." Fortune came from risk. There was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. Moreover, it was not easy for him to carry out missions in the Blue Dragon Society in the past. It was still full of danger. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "That's good. However, your current strength is still not enough for Chunyang Dao sect to value you. I still have to teach you some things." Currently, Yi Xiao was full of killing techniques. With his strength and talent, he was already qualified to join the Chunyang Dao sect. However, it was obvious that he was still far from being valued by the Chunyang Dao sect. Right now, Yi Xiao had quite a few demonic path martial arts on him. He had the great demonic blood technique and the blood transformation divine saber that Chu Xiu had given him, as well as some of the techniques that he had learned from the Blue Dragon Society. In any case, none of them were good. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to modify Yi Xiao's cultivation method. In fact, Yi Xiao still had some connections with Taoism. In the beginning, because his talent was not so outstanding, the cultivation method that Chu Xiu gave him was the Xiantian skill. Although the Xiantian skill did not add much to combat power, it could sort out the meridians of a martial artist, wash his marrow, and change his talent. The foundation of Yi Xiao's martial arts was itself the foundation of Taoism, including Chu Xiu. However, this was not enough. Chu Xiu had to let him have a deeper understanding of the Taoism connotation. Therefore, Chu Xiu was ready to teach him the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. However, something like the heaven's sun gazing at air technique could not be learned in a short period of time. Even Chu Xiu at that time had only learned it when he was in a life-and-death crisis. However, it did not matter. Chu Xiu did not expect Yi Xiao to learn the heaven's sun gazing at air technique in such a short period of time. He only needed Yi Xiao to comprehend a part of the Taoism power brought by the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. Simply put, he wanted Yi Xiao to look like a natural Daoist. Concentrate, close your eyes, and empty your mind. You don't need to remember the detailed explanation of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. You only need to remember this feeling. As for the cultivation method, if there is an opportunity in the future, you will naturally comprehend it. Yi Xiao nodded and began to concentrate and close his eyes according to Chu Xiu's instructions. The next moment, an extremely mysterious aura had already wrapped around him. In an instant, he seemed to be in the most origin of this space. Heaven and earth, yin and yang, and even the power of heaven and earth, such as wind, cloud, thunder, and lightning, were dancing around him. Yi Xiao had not yet reached the realm of oneness of heaven and man, so his understanding of the power of heaven and earth was almost zero. At this time, what he felt was the most basic Tao in this world. The nature of heaven and earth was the Tao. He could not understand these things, but they were violently poured into his mind by Chu Xiu. After 3 days and 3 nights, when Yi Xiao completely walked out of this state, he felt dizzy. However, his eyes were shining, and there were even the sun, moon, and stars rotating in them. However, in Chu Xiu's eyes, at this time, Yi Xiao's whole body was shining with a faint aura of Tao connotation. It was very thick, so thick that it was somewhat fake. However, it did not matter. After 2 days, when Yi Xiao got used to it, he would appear much more natural. By then, in the eyes of outsiders, Yi Xiao would definitely be a cultivation genius. However, this was not enough. What Chu Xiu wanted to give to the Chunyang Dao sect was not only a cultivation genius, but also a genius who was the most suitable for the Chunyang Dao sect. What kind of person was suitable for the Chunyang Dao sect? Of course, it was someone like Shi Yunzi, who was born with a pure Yang Dao body and could perfectly control the pure Yang divine weapon. Chu Xiu was unable to disguise his pure Yang Dao body, but he was still able to augment Yi Xiao with a portion of his pure Yang power. The Mahavirokana Dharma formed by the sun-changing technique was the purest pure Yang power. It should be said that it was in existence with the pure Yang power of the Chunyang Dao sect. The difference was that one was supported by the power of Dao connotation, while the other was supported by the light of Buddha. Chu Xiu only needed to purify the power of Mahavirokana with the power of Taoism and pour it into Yi Xiao's body, so that he would have a natural affinity with the pure Yang power. After a few days, Yi Xiao's Gang Qi had changed. It became a kind of Gang Qi that was inclined to the attribute of Taoism, with a slight amount of pure Yang power. Seeing Yi Xiao in this state, Chu Xiu nodded and threw a few sword techniques to Yi Xiao. He said, "The Chunyang Dao sect uses swords. Don't use saber techniques for the time being. The identity I found for you is a Northern Yen individual cultivator. You have a fiery temper and hate evil. These sword techniques are some basic sword techniques, which are just right for your identity. The Jinwu Hall will try their best to cooperate with you in the next action, but after you enter the Chunyang Dao sect, you will have to rely on yourself." Yi Xiao nodded as if he was holding his future in his hands as he held those sword techniques in his hands. Shanyang Prefecture in the Northern Yen Forest Prefecture. Chu Xiu was very familiar with this place because it was the first place he stayed after he left Wei County and came to the Northern Yen. Today was the ceremony for the disciples of the Fang family of Shanyang Prefecture to enter the Chunyang Dao sect. It was very grand. Even Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori, who were in charge of the Chunyang Dao sect's Northern Yen branch, would be there. The master of the Fang family had specially invited all the forces in the Shanyang Prefecture. It was obvious that he was showing off. Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori sat in the main hall of the Fang family, looking impatient. Originally, it would not be so troublesome to accept a disciple, but this disciple of the Fang family was really talented. Most importantly, he had a strong affinity with the pure Yang Gang Qi. It could even be said that he was born to cultivate the pure Yang Gang Qi. This disciple of the Fang family could be said to be the most surprising one among all the disciples that the Chunyang Dao sect had accepted since they came to the Northern Yen. Therefore, even though they knew that the master of the Fang family was actually using the power of the Chunyang Dao sect to show off, they had no choice but to agree to it. It could be considered as giving him face. After all, his son was going to cultivate in the Chunyang Dao sect from now on. Even though he was their junior, they still had to take care of his feelings. Anyway, this was just a one-time thing. A disciple with such talent would definitely not stay in the Northern Yen. He would definitely be sent back to the mountain gate of the Chunyang Dao sect in the Eastern Qi to cultivate. He might not be able to leave the mountain for the next 10 years. The master of the Fang family greeted the guests and introduced them to everyone who came. As he listened to the compliments of the others, he grinned so widely that it almost reached his ears. The heavens had blessed the Fang family. They had given birth to such a talented son who was valued by the Chunyang Dao sect. From now on, the Fang family would soar to the top. However, at this moment, a commotion suddenly came from outside. There was even the sound of weapons clashing. This caused the master of the Fang family to instantly change his expression. Today was a big day for the Fang family. Who would dare to cause trouble here? Before the master of the Fang family could send someone to investigate, two people who were fighting went straight into the main hall. Of course, to be precise, this was not a fight, but a chase. the person being chased was covered in blood. He was a ferocious-looking one-eyed brawny man who was holding a saber that was as tall as a person. The person who was chasing him was Yi Xiao. However, the current Yi Xiao was completely different from the black-clothed cold-blooded killer he was in the Blue Dragon Society. He was wearing a green warrior suit with some patches on it. In his hand was an ordinary Damascus iron sword. With a righteous expression on his face, he shouted angrily, "Chen Wujiao. Let's see where you can run now. Your serpent dragon village has killed countless people and is full of evil. Today, I will kill you for the sake of the people." When the others heard Chen Wujiao's name, they were all shocked. Why would this ruthless bandit come here? Chen Wujiao was a very famous bandit on the trade route from Lingzhong Commandery to Wei Commandery. He had the strength of the Three-Flower Realm. This kind of strength was already considered very shocking among the bandits. The Serpent Dragon village under his command had 300 cavalrymen. They came and went like the wind, and all the merchants that traveled between Wei Commandery and northern Yen had been robbed by him. Moreover, the other bandits still followed some rules. They usually only took goods and did not take lives. However, this Chen Wujiao was cruel and merciless. After taking goods, sometimes he would still take lives. From the current situation, it seemed that this young hero could not stand Chen Wujiao's character. That was why he attacked the Serpent Dragon village and chased him to this point. However, everyone was confused. If Chen Wujiao wanted to escape, he could have escaped to Shangmang Mountain, which was on the border of northern Yen and Wei Commandery. Why did he escape to the Fang family? Chapter 943. Yi Zhao's appearance was meticulously planned by Chu Xiu. He was a righteous young man. Although he was an itinerant cultivator, he abhorred evil and challenged a bandit village alone. This achievement was enough to attract people's attention. Moreover, Chu Xiu had even prepared Yi Zhao's identity. At this moment, the people in the hall were still confused about Yi Zhao's identity. Someone asked the anemophilia in the crowd, "Who is this young man? Since when did our Lingzhong Commandery have such a talented person?" Yi Zhao's identity was also changed by Wind Sweeping Tower. In fact, it was not changed much. All Chu Xiu wanted was the identity of a young itinerant cultivator. With a word from Qi Yuanli, Wind Sweeping Tower updated all the information about the anemophilia in northern Yen with this person's name. Yi Xiao was still called Yi Xiao, but his identity was completely different. The anemophilia waved his fan and said, "This young man is not from Lingzhong Commandery. He is an itinerant cultivator from Yuyang in western Yen. His name is Yi Xiao. He was taught by some Jianghu wanderers when he was young, so he is motivated to travel the Jianghu and punish evil. He has only recently made a name for himself." Everyone in the hall nodded. He was just an itinerant cultivator. No matter how young he was, it was not worth paying attention to. However, at this moment, no one noticed that Meiko Mori and Shiyunzi were staring at Yi Xiao. Shiyunzi said in a daze, "Uncle Master, did you see that?" Meiko Mori also said in a daze, "Of course I saw it. His Taoist connotation is formed by nature. This young man is qualified to join our Dao sect." At this moment, the long sword in Yi Zhao's hand rippled with a sword light. It was just an ordinary sword light, but Shiyunzi and Meiko Mori could feel that Yi Zhao's true qi contained a trace of extreme yang power. It was not because he had cultivated this kind of cultivation method, but because he was born with this kind of power. Shiyunzi and Meiko Mori looked at each other, and even their breathing quickened. A genius. This young man was the most suitable genius for the Chunyang Dao sect. Although it was not comparable to Shiyunzi's pure young Daoist physique, the attribute of the inner force that Yi Xiao displayed was definitely innately compatible with the pure yang power of the pure yang Daoist sect. Once he cultivated the pure yang Daoist sect's cultivation method, his cultivation would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Both of them were filled with boundless joy and surprise. Compared to Yi Xiao, the disciples of the Fang clan and Yuanzi. Previously, when they came here to support the Fang clan, they were somewhat unwilling. They did not expect that there would be an unexpected surprise this time. Shi Yunzi said in a low voice, "I heard from the Jianghu people that this kid is an itinerant cultivator. Yunzi Chen. And Yunzi Tian. And King. Yunzi, and Yunzi Yan Qi. Yunzi Dao cultivator who is Chen, the cultivation method is Qing Yun." During this period of time, only 10% of the disciples recruited by the pure Yang Dao sect in northern Yen were rogue cultivators. Most of them were disciples nurtured by small aristocratic families like the Fang family. One had to admit that things like inheritance were very important. If both parents were martial artists, then the martial arts talent of the offspring would also increase. Moreover, they had a good foundation from the moment they were born. Regardless of whether this foundation was good or bad, it could at least stimulate a martial artist's potential. On the contrary, some ordinary civilians, even if they had martial arts talent, they might not be able to come into contact with martial arts in their lifetime. Moreover, because he did not have a good foundation when he was young, it caused his meridians to gradually close up. No matter how good his talent was, it would only be a waste in the end. However, for the Chunyang Dao sect, they were still more willing to accept those unaffiliated martial artists with no background into the sect because it was simple and convenient. These small forces were not very powerful, but they were too good at stirring up trouble. Last time, the conflict between them and Chu Xiu was caused by these small forces. It was easier to control the disciples who were clean. Mako Mori nodded and said, "Let's wait and see. This kid seems to have a good reputation, but we still have to pay attention to his temperament." At this time, Chen Wujiao had already been seriously injured by Yi Xiao's pursuit, and Yi Xiao had even held back. With the killing methods that Yi Xiao had trained in the Blue Dragon Society, if he really wanted to kill Chen Wujiao, 3 moves would be enough. Fang family head. Save me. Chen Wujiao suddenly shouted at the Fang family head. The Fang family head's expression changed slightly, and his expression was uncertain. He suddenly took action and captured Chen Wujiao. He said to Yi Xiao, "Young hero Yi, right? This person is a bandit from Shangmang Mountain. He has robbed many caravans, and the Fang family has a grudge against him. There is no need to trouble young hero Yi to kill him. When there is time, I will gather the friends and relatives of those who have been harmed by this villain, and we will hold a public trial to execute him." Yi Xiao laughed coldly and said, "Do you think I'm an idiot? Chen Wujiao said before that the Serpent Dragon village under his command was built together with you. All these years, the Fang family has been secretly helping the Serpent Dragon village. All the forces that have a grudge against the Fang family or have any competition with the Fang family have been massacred by this villain." As soon as he said this, everyone's expression changed. They looked at the Fang family head with a strange expression. This Chen Wujiao didn't kill every single one of his targets, but those who were killed by him seemed to be the Fang family's competitors. If the Fang family really did such a thing, it would be equivalent to destroying the entire Mountain Sun prefecture. The Fang family head snorted coldly and said, "Nonsense. How could the Fang family do such a thing?" Yi Xiao laughed coldly and said, "If the Fang family has nothing to do with Chen Wujiao, why didn't he escape into Shangmang Mountain when I was chasing him? Why did he have to escape to the Mountain Sun prefecture, to your Fang family? If the Fang family has nothing to do with Chen Wujiao, why did he call for help just now?" While the Fang family head was still thinking of an excuse, Yi Xiao had already rushed forward. The Fang family head's expression changed. He immediately ordered a group of people to stop Yi Xiao. However, at this moment, Yi Xiao seemed to have gone mad. Dozens of people couldn't stop him, so he rushed out of the crowd and killed Chen Wujiao. The Fang family head was so angry that his entire body was trembling. However, Yi Xiao still carried Chen Wujiao's head and swaggered out. The other martial artists who came to watch the ceremony looked at the Fong family head with different expressions. It was easy to tell whether the young man's words were true or not. Although they didn't completely fall out today, the Fong family's days in the Mountain Sun Prefecture were probably not going to be easy. Xianxia and Mako Mori looked at each other and immediately followed. The Fong family head watched as the people of the Chunyang Dao sect left. He wanted to stop them, but Xianxia and Mako Mori didn't even look at him. Outside the Fong family head, Mako Mori called out to Yi Xiao, "Little brother, please wait a moment." Yi Xiao turned around and asked expressionlessly, "What is it?" Mako Mori smiled and said, "Do you know who we are?" Yi Xiao nodded and said, "I do. We are the enlightened master of the Chunyang Dao sect, one of the 3 major Daoist sections." The Fong family had already started to spread the news a few days ago. Not only the Mountain Sun Prefecture knows about it, but the entire Linzhong Commandery also knows about it. Mako Mori continued to smile kindly and said, "Little brother, I see that you are very talented, so I want to take you into the Chunyang Dao sect. What do you think?" Yi Xiao shook his head and said, "Nothing much." Mako Mori and Xianxia were stunned. During this period of time, they had been recruiting disciples in the northern Yen land. Whether they were rogue cultivators or those from small forces, they were all excited when they heard that they could be accepted into the Chunyang Dao sect. But now, this kid actually rejected it. Did he know what he was rejecting? Why? Do you know what it means to join the Chunyang Dao sect? Mako Mori asked curiously. Yi Xiao said lightly, "Of course I know what it means to join the Chunyang Dao sect. It means that I will stand out and have a meteoric rise. However, when I was learning martial arts in the past, my master once taught me that as a martial artist, it is very unjust to slay the world with a sword. We must live up to our conscience and the sword in our hands." Today, the Fong family's patriarch had colluded with Chen Wujiao and cruelly harmed passing merchants. He could simply be said to be wicked beyond redemption and despicable to the extreme. I can only kill Chen Wujiao alone, but I can't destroy the Fong family. However, the Chunyang Dao sect can manage these things. In the end, not only do you not care, but you are also with the Fong family, supporting the Fong family. The so-called righteous sects are still like flies for personal gain, and they are in cahoots with the Fong family. No matter how strong they are, no matter how powerful they are, I will not join such a sect. I, Yi, am not worthy of such a high position. Apart from Xianxia and Mako Mori, there were a few other Chunyang Dao sect martial artists present. Hearing him insult the Chunyang Dao sect, the other Chunyang Dao sect martial artists were immediately enraged. They wanted to cause trouble for Yi Xiao. However, Mako Mori held them back. There was no anger on his face. Instead, there was a satisfied look on his face. This young man has a pure heart. Although he has a fiery temper and doesn't know how to be flexible, he is righteous and hates evil. He is a rare good seedling. He said in a deep voice, "Your master is a true chivalrous man. I wonder where he is now." Yi Xiao was silent for a moment, then said, "Master is dead. He is just an ordinary wandering cultivator. His strength is not as strong as I am now. When he was helping a wandering cultivator to uphold justice, he was besieged and killed by a sect. Right now, his master was Chu Xiu in name. However, it was Chu Xiu who asked him to say this. He couldn't be blamed for being disrespectful to Chu Xiu." Mako Mori said, "You said that we are in cahoots with the Fong family. You are wrong about that. The Chunyang Dao sect only accepted a disciple from the Fong family. If the Fong family uses the reputation of the Chunyang Dao sect to do evil, the Chunyang Dao sect will be the first to not spare them. However, the matter between the Fong family and Chen Wujiao is indeed the fault of the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, this time, the Chunyang Dao sect will investigate the Fong family strictly even if we don't want the disciple from the Fong family. It is good that you are chivalrous, but you have to know that there are too many injustices in this world. Without strength, you can't eradicate them. Your master died because he was alone and was surrounded and attacked by others. If you join the Chunyang Dao sect, the entire Chunyang Dao sect will support you. Young man, you won't regret joining the Chunyang Dao sect. Even if you really regret it, I will give you a promise. I can let you go at any time. Chapter 944. Sometimes, people were so cheap that they wouldn't cherish what was easily obtained. Those that were rejected but welcomed, and those that were not easily obtained would seem precious instead. When those young martial artists heard that Chunyang Dao sect wanted to recruit them, they were all excited, but Mako Mori and Shi Yunzi didn't feel anything. But Yi Xiao rejected them without hesitation, and he even said that Chunyang Dao sect was fishing for fame, which aroused their interest instead. Yi Xiao hesitated a little. Is what you said true? Mako Mori said with a smile, of course it's true, don't be blinded by ignorance. My Chunyang Dao sect is also a major righteous sect. Today's matter was just a moment of carelessness. You can ask around in the martial world. My Chunyang Dao sect may not have a good reputation in the martial world, but have you seen anyone say that my Chunyang Dao sect colluded with the evil people? Shi Yunzi on the side said, and your talent is very suitable to cultivate the martial arts of Chunyang Dao sect. Although you are motivated to eradicate many injustices in this world, this also requires strength. Today you can't even take down the Fong family. What can you do when you encounter evil people who are stronger than you in the future? If you join my Chunyang Dao sect, your future achievements will not be as simple as the martial arts Grand Master of the real Pellet State. The two took turns to explain and persuade him, and even offered countless conditions to entice him. The other disciples of Chunyang Dao sect were a little jealous. When they joined Chunyang Dao sect was actually still at its peak, and it wasn't like now. Therefore, at that time, Chunyang Dao sect was very strict in accepting disciples. They were all elites who had been eliminated several times. As a result, this kid was recruited by Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori in turn as if it was a sin not to accept him into Chunyang Dao sect. It was simply unreasonable. Under the premise that the two of them were so sincere, Yi Xiao reluctantly agreed to join Chunyang Dao sect. Seeing that Yi Xiao finally agreed, Mako Mori said with a serious expression, since little brother has now joined my Chunyang Dao sect, you are no longer a casual martial artist from now on. You need to know the rules of a big sect. Joining the sect will teach you martial arts and provide protection. In the future, you will also have to fight for the interests of the sect. From now on, you are no longer alone. Your every move represents Chunyang Dao sect. Chunyang Dao sect is your backing, but at the same, you can't lose the face of Chunyang Dao sect. Yi Xiao nodded with a solemn expression. I know this. Master taught me before. Heaven and earth do not need to bow to the ruler, and the ruler does not need to kneel to the ruler. Only one's parents and the grace of teaching can never be forgotten. Mako Mori and Shi Yunzi looked at each other and nodded with satisfaction. This kid was a good seedling, and he would definitely be one of the pillars of Chunyang Dao sect in the future. Although it was still a little early to say, looking at his temperament and potential, he would not be too bad in the future. Originally, when Chunyang Dao sect came to northern Yen, even Ling Yunzi came with the intention of giving it a try. He did not expect to get such an unexpected reward. It was worth it. Therefore, Yi Xiao was successfully brought to the Chunyang Dao sect's branch. Originally, with Yi Xiao's talent, he would definitely be sent to the mountain gate of Eastern Qi's Chunyang Dao sect to cultivate. However, Chunyang Dao sect still accepted many disciples here, and they were going to send them over when they had enough people. During his time in the northern Yen branch, because Yi Xiao already had some foundation, Mako Mori taught Chunyang Dao sect's pure Yang Dao scripture to Yi Xiao. Because of the purified Mahavirokana's power, Yi Xiao's inner force attribute had changed a little on the basis of the source. Cultivating the pure Yang Dao scripture again was like a fish in water, and it was not an exaggeration to say that he made tremendous progress. Moreover, when he cultivated, he was so crazy that even Xianxia and Mako Mori were shocked. Nowadays, it was rare to see a young man who cultivated so hard. In fact, Yi Xiao was showing his true colors. When he was in Blue Dragon Society, he was already so crazy and hardworking in his cultivation. Xianxia shook his head and said, "No wonder this kid has such a cultivation level even though he's a lone cultivator. God knows how he's been living all these years. He's a martial arts madman." Shou Zhenzi took a look at him and said, "I've heard from Ling Yunzi that when you first joined the Pure Yang Dao sect, you spent more time on playing than cultivating. If you could cultivate as hard as Yi Xiao, with your Pure Yang Dao body's talent, you wouldn't be at your current cultivation level." Xianxia smiled awkwardly and said, "Life is short. If I don't enjoy myself, when I'm about to die in the future, I'll look back on how boring my life has been. Wouldn't I regret it to death? I'll teach this kid a good lesson someday. When it comes to cultivation, it's enough. Why does he have to work so hard?" Shou Zhenzi glared at him. "Don't instill your messy theories into him. The path of martial arts is like a boundless sea of bitterness. If you stop a step, you will fall behind by a bit." Mako Mori was very satisfied with Yi Xiao. Such a good seedling was worth cultivating. However, he didn't know that Yi Xiao was extremely anxious at the moment. It was because he realized that he seemed to be trapped in Chunyang Dao sect. The plan that official Chu gave him was to stir up a conflict between Taoism and Buddhism. In the end, he was ordered by Mako Mori to stay in Chunyang Dao sect to cultivate. Although Chunyang Dao sect was very generous to him and there were all kinds of cultivation resources, what about his mission? After thinking about it, Yi Xiao took the initiative to look for Mako Mori and said, "Patriarch, I see that the other senior brothers are walking outside. I've been in Chunyang Dao sect for so long, but I've been cultivating with cultivation resources. I haven't made any contributions. I want to go out and help the sect find suitable disciples." Mako Mori waved his hand and said, "You don't have to do these things. How long have you been in the sect? You don't even have a Daoist name. What's the rush? Remember, everyone has their own responsibilities, including the sect leader. Although you're cultivating with a lot of resources now and don't have to do anything, when the sect needs you in the future, you'll have to put in more effort." Mako Mori was doing this for Yi Xiao's sake. It would be a waste if a talented disciple like him was sent to do those complicated things and neglected his cultivation. At this moment, Xianxia said, "I think this kid can't hold it in anymore. Just let him go out. Don't forget, this kid has always been a rogue cultivator. He's been fighting in the Jianghu all day. If you suddenly ask him to stay here and cultivate all day, I don't think he'll be able to hold it in. Cultivation has to be done step by step. If he forcefully holds it in, it might affect his cultivation speed." Hearing Xianxia's words, Mako Mori felt that it made sense. He nodded and called for a Daoist in his 30s. He said in a deep voice, "Xianxia, I'll leave Yi Xiao to you. Take him with you during this time. Remember, be careful." Yi Xiao's name was very famous in the entire Chunyang Dao sect. Daoist Xianxia also knew that he was the only disciple that Xianxia and Mako Mori had personally asked to join the Chunyang Dao sect. So he quickly said, "Don't worry, Grand Uncle. I'll be careful." After Xianxia brought Yi Xiao out, Yi Xiao asked, "Senior Martial Brother Xianxia, do we usually go around the whole northern Yen looking for disciples?" Daoist Xianxia hesitated and said, "Senior Martial Brother? Forget it. You haven't officially ranked in terms of seniority yet. Just call me Senior Martial Brother for now." Within the Chunyang Dao sect, there was also a seniority system. When Yi Xiao entered the sect, he might be 2 generations younger than Xianxia and have to call him Grand Uncle. Of course, it was also possible that Ling Yunzi would accept him as a disciple. In that case, he would become Xianxia's Grand Uncle. Daoist Xianxia said in a deep voice, "Of course we won't go around randomly. The northern Yan region is so big, and the sects have already been divided. Who will go to which county to search for suitable disciples, in addition to the rogue cultivators? Some people are willing to send their disciples to the Chunyang Dao sect, but some of the leaders of the forces are not willing to send their disciples to Eastern Qi. They would rather cultivate their own disciples. In this case, we can only persuade them with kind words. If we can't persuade them, then there's nothing we can do. But we have to be careful of the others." A strange look appeared in Yizhao's eyes. He asked, "Be careful of who?" Daoist Xianxia said coldly, "Of course be careful of the monks from the Great Light Temple. They always like to snatch people from us. The monks from the Great Light Temple have even brought the entire Vajrayard. We are indeed behind them in terms of numbers. Moreover, the Great Light Temple is in the north, near the northern Yan region. In terms of reputation, they are indeed more famous than the Chunyang Dao sect. They are more trusted by the other forces. But they don't think about it. Sending their disciples to the Great Light Temple to be monks is equivalent to ending their lineage. How could they bear to do that? Just like the Chunyang Dao sect, it doesn't matter if we marry or have children. Isn't that great?" A strange look appeared in Yizhao's eyes. "Senior martial brother, you've already married and had children?" Daoist Xianxia said awkwardly, "I haven't. But for an outstanding Taoist hero like me, I don't have to worry about finding a wife. It's just that I don't care about what's going on outside and only focus on cultivating the Tao scripture. My thoughts are all on cultivation. Naturally, I don't care about women. It's okay. I'm still young. It won't be too late to get married after I've achieved something in my cultivation." Yi Shao took a look at Daoist Xianxia. He was indeed not old. He was only in his 30s. However, he had a square face, a bulbous nose, a wide forehead, and a big mouth. How could he have the cheek to say that he was outstanding? Initially, Yi Shao thought that the Chunyang Dao sect was made up of stubborn old Daoist priests. Now, it seemed that the younger generation of martial artists was quite interesting. However, enemies were enemies. No matter how interesting they were, they still had to be tricked. Chapter 945. Daoist Xianxia knew that Yi Zhao's identity was sensitive, so he deliberately did not bring him to places where there was a conflict with the Great Light Temple. Under normal circumstances, as the Great Light Temple was close to the extreme north, they were also active in the northern Yan, while the Chunyang Dao sect was active in South and West Yan. West Yan was the territory of the Huangfu clan. When Daoist Xianxia brought Yi Shao and a few disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect to West Yan, he also visited the people of the Huangfu clan. The people of the Huangfu clan were very polite. They did not seem to care that the Chunyang Dao sect was recruiting disciples in West Yan. The Huangfu clan was an aristocratic family, not a sect. Even if the Chunyang Dao sect emptied the entire West Yan, they would not care. As Daoist Xianxia brought Yi Shao and the others to a small aristocratic family in West Yan, he said, "When we arrive at the Lin clan, remember not to be too polite. Just put on an attitude that the Chunyang Dao sect is giving you face by accepting your clan's disciples. Otherwise, these small aristocratic families will take advantage of us and make all sorts of requests. I've already made a trip to the Lin clan. The clan leader of the Lin clan even said that his son is his only son and that he needs to think about it. Pfft! Don't think I don't know that he has a few sons. Seeing that the Chunyang Dao sect has not contacted him for so long, he has taken the initiative to contact us. So, after we enter, there's no need to be polite to them. Just bring your people and leave." The other Daoist priests of the Chunyang Dao sect nodded. Their senior brother was experienced. If he said what to do, then they would do it. However, when they arrived at the Lin family patriarch did not show himself. Instead, he sent his own younger brother to receive Yi Xiao and the others. Moreover, his attitude was hesitant, as if he was deliberately delaying something. Daoist Xianxia felt that something was wrong. He pushed the other party away and snorted. "What is the Lin clan doing? You called us here, but you didn't bring our people out. Are you trying to fool the Chunyang Dao sect?" The Lin family warrior hurriedly said, "I wouldn't dare, of course I wouldn't dare." Although he said that he didn't dare, he still didn't bring the person over. Daoist Xianxia felt that something was wrong. Suddenly, he sensed a strange aura. He directly pushed the Lin family's warrior away and walked straight to another reception room. Pushing open the door and entering, it turned out to be the head of the Lin family and a few monks from the great Guangming temple. Daoist Xianxia's face darkened. "Lin family head, what do you mean by this?" The head of the Lin clan smiled awkwardly and said, "Sir, please don't blame me. I suddenly realized that my son is more suitable to be a disciple of the Temple of Great Light. Therefore, I'm afraid the agreement I made with you will have to be nullified." Daoist Xianxia said coldly, "Didn't you say that your Lin family only has one son? Why, you're willing to send him to the Temple of Great Light to become a monk? Aren't you afraid that your Lin family will have no more descendants?" The head of the Lin family wiped the cold sweat off his forehead as he anxiously thought about what excuse he should give. However, before he could come up with an excuse, Daoist Xianxia shouted, "What does the Lin family think our Chunyang Dao sect is? You called us here, but in the end, you want our disciple to be a disciple of someone else. Are you trying to make a fool out of our Chunyang Dao sect?" The head of the Lin family trembled in fear. At that moment, from the Temple of Great Light side, a young monk in his 30s stood up and said with a smile, "Almsgivers of the Chunyang Dao sect, please don't be anxious. Taking in a disciple is also a matter of fate. This disciple from the Lin family should be fated with our Temple of Great Light. That's why he's joining us at this time." The monk in white had a good appearance. At least, he was much better than the square-faced Daoist Xianxia. However, although his tone was gentle, his attitude was extremely tough. If the disciple from the Lin family is fated with the Temple of Great Light, then he's not fated with the Chunyang Dao sect. Therefore, if they want this disciple, the Chunyang Dao sect can go wherever it wants to go. Daoist Xianxia said coldly, "Big monk, you've crossed the line. This is the land of West Yen. What do you mean by coming here to take in a disciple?" The monk in white shook his head and said, "What a joke. Who set the line? Why can't I come?" Daoist Xianxia was speechless. This was an unspoken rule. Who would set the rule? He said with a gloomy expression, "So you're saying that you're determined to take him away today?" The monk in white from the Temple of Great Light said calmly, "Why can't I take the disciple from the Temple of Great Light?" The long sword in Daoist Xianxia's hand suddenly burned with scorching pure yang qi. He stabbed the sword at the monk in white and said coldly, "Today, I'd like to see who can leave this place. The disciple that my Chunyang Dao sect can't take away, your Temple of Great Light can't either." During this period of time, the conflict between Taoism and Buddhism was not the first or second time. Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori had already told them that when facing the martial artists from the Temple of Great Light, although they did not have to fight to the death, they did not have to give in either. Victory or defeat would be determined by one's fists. Daoist Xianxia might look ugly, but he was a genuine unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. Although the monk in front of him looked young, he was actually a martial artist from the Temple of Great Light with the name Ming. He had reached the unity of heaven and man realm long ago, so he could maintain this appearance. The two unity of heaven and man realm martial artists immediately started fighting in the narrow living room. As they fought, it seemed like they could not unleash their full power. They even fought outside. At this moment, Yi Xiao suddenly realized that after the other martial artists from the Temple of Great Light saw the fight, they subconsciously became vigilant and were ready to attack at any time. However, they all protected a young monk behind them at the same time. Yi Xiao could almost tell with one glance that the other party was definitely not an old disciple of the Temple of Great Light, but a newly recruited one. The reason was simple. Although the other party had shaved his head, his scalp was still slightly green. This was clearly a sign that he had just shaved his head. Moreover, all the monks present subconsciously protected him behind them. This was not only because he was not strong enough, but also because the other party seemed to be very important. At least to the Temple of Great Light, the other party was very important. Yi Xiao's eyes narrowed, and he directly pulled out the long sword in his hand. He shouted, "The Temple of Great Light is too much." As his voice fell, he directly charged towards the people from the Temple of Great Light. The other Daoist priests from the Chunyang Dao sect were stunned, but when they saw him attack, they also quickly followed and charged forward. In reality, under such circumstances, both parties did not need to fight to the death. They only needed to wait for the victor to be decided between the Daoist priest Xian Yi and the martial artist from the Temple of Great Light. However, seeing Yi Xiao take the lead, coupled with Yi Xiao's status, the other disciples of the pure Yang Daoist sect also rushed out when they saw this scene. They were in a mess with the warriors of the Great Light Temple. Initially, Yi Xiao used a saber, so he was still not used to using a sword. However, when he was an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society, Duanwu Qianshan had once taught him that there was no need to think about what weapon he was holding in his hand. The ultimate goal of any weapon was to kill. The long sword in Yi Xiao's hand flashed with scorching pure yang qi. However, to him at this moment, whether it was pure yang qi or demonic qi, they were all used to kill. It was fine as long as it could be powerful. Among the disciples from the Temple of Great Light, there was no existence in the unity of heaven and man realm. Even though there were a few martial artists in the Five Qis origin realm, their actual combat experience paled in comparison to Yi Xiao, who had been trained in killing. In just a few dozen moves, Yi Xiao had already forced back a few martial artists from the Temple of Great Light and killed one of them. The young monk who was protected in the middle of the crowd was only in the physical invulnerability realm. Seeing that Yi Xiao's sword was about to slash at him, he was not afraid in the face of danger and did not panic. All the qi, blood, and gang qi in his body surged into his arms. When Yi Xiao's sword was about to pierce him, he used his hands to forcefully clamp Yi Xiao's sword. Although his hands were twisted by the pure yang qi to the point that his bones were exposed, he still managed to clamp Yi Xiao's sword. "Senior! Attack!" The monk shouted at the others. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity when Yi Xiao's weapon was in his hands to kill Yi Xiao. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. He did not know when, but a scabbard shining with pure yang qi had already pierced through his chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Yi Xiao's eyes were emotionless. The only thing that could kill was a weapon. Junior brother Yan Guang. A few martial artists from the Temple of Great Light were furious. They knew how important this junior brother Yan Guang was to the Temple of Great Light. This person was a genius that Su Yan Guang found in the south of Yen. He was born to cultivate the furious Vajra Heart Sutra of the Temple of Great Light. His mind was extremely calm, so calm that he would not be affected by the side effects of the furious Vajra Heart Sutra. Originally, the disciples that the Temple of Great Light recruited would be sent to the temples in the north to shave their tongues. However, because of Yan Guang's talent, they were afraid that some accident would happen along the way, so they shaved Yan Guang alone, resulting in this matter. However, who would have thought that they would lose the disciple that they valued the most in the Temple of Great Light when they wanted to take in another disciple along the way? The monk in white, who was fighting fiercely outside, also noticed this and instantly began to attack Daoist Xian Yi in a frenzy. Seeing that the group of monks from the Temple of Great Light seemed to have gone crazy, Daoist Xian Yi could no longer care about snatching disciples. He hurriedly brought Yi Xiao and the others away as he fought. In the Lin family, the monks from the Temple of Great Light looked at Yan Guang's corpse on the ground. They all frowned and their anger surged. The monk in white who looked elegant earlier also shouted furiously, Chunyang Dao sect. This matter is definitely not over. The master of the Lin family could not be bothered to consider whether to send his disciple to the Temple of Great Light or to the Chunyang Dao sect. He only knew one thing. This matter seemed to have blown up. Chapter 946. The Great Light Temple might have clashed with the Chunyang Dao sect before, but it was just a conflict between the two parties. It was not an intense battle, so no one was killed. However, this time, Yi Shao killed someone. Moreover, he killed a disciple that the Great Light Temple valued so much. How could the Great Light Temple not be angry? Once the news spread, even Su Yan could not suppress his anger. He brought 2 old monks of the Jing generation and a group of Great Light Temple disciples to cause trouble for the Chunyang Dao sect. In the Chunyang Dao sect, Shi Yunzi and Mako Mori held their heads in pain. Shi Yunzi stared at Yi Shao with an unfriendly gaze. Why did you kill someone from the Great Light Temple? Compared to Mako Mori, Shi Yunzi was actually more sensitive. Previously, he thought that Yi Shao was a chivalrous person, but now, it seemed that he was extraordinarily ruthless when he attacked. Was there such a chivalrous person? Yi Shao's heart skipped a beat. He also knew that he had acted too hastily this time. Actually, his original plan was not like this. Chu Xiu only asked him to stir up the enmity between the Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect. He did not give Yi Shao a time limit. Therefore, Yi Shao's original plan was to intensify the conflict between the other party bit by bit. He killed Yan Guang previously because the other party was protected too clearly, so it was a little conspicuous. However, who would have thought that the Great Light Temple would value that guy so much? Killing him caused the Great Light Temple to go crazy. Therefore, if he did not explain well this time, it would be a little dangerous. Although he was anxious, on the surface, Yi Shao put on a righteous look and said, "Killing the enemy means killing. Previously, you taught me that since I have joined a sect, should put the interests of the sect first. Since we are enemies with the Great Light Temple, why can't I kill them? I don't understand the twists and turns between the big sects, but now, it seems that I have killed someone, so there seems to be trouble. I'll take responsibility for my own actions. If those monks come looking for trouble, I'll fight it out with them." Mako Mori sighed, then he waved his hand and said to Shi Yunzi, "Don't blame him. He is a rogue cultivator, so he really doesn't know much about the relationships between the big sections. Don't forget the scene when we first met him. It's also our fault that we didn't give him a proper reminder. That's why he's like this today." After hearing Mako Mori's words, Shi Yunzi recalled that when they first met Yi Shao, he had single-handedly challenged the entire Jiao Dragon village and killed Chen Wujiao in front of everyone. Moreover, when they tried to recruit him into the Chunyang Dao sect, he was still holding Chen Wujiao's head. One could imagine that even though he hated evil, he had climbed his way up from the bottom of the martial arts world. His hands were stained with countless lives and blood. Indeed, people like him did not understand the checks and balances between the big sects, as well as the various schemes. To them, an enemy was an enemy, so they could just kill him and be done with it. Why bother with so many complicated things? Shi Yunzi sighed, then waved his hand and said, "Forget it, it's none of your business. You're now a disciple of the Chunyang Dao sect. The Chunyang Dao sect will never throw a disciple out to be the scapegoat no matter what. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. At most, we'll just fight with those monks. You can leave now." After letting Yi Shao leave, Shi Yunzi said to Mako Mori, "Uncle Master, do you think those monks will really do it?" Mako Mori shook his head and said, "Who knows? If the Great Light Temple had sent another martial institution, perhaps there would have been room for discussion. However, the Great Light Temple just had to send the Vajra school this time, so it's a little tricky. Those fellows from the Vajra school are very hot-tempered. Now that someone has died, even if they say they don't want to do anything, I'm afraid they won't be able to stop their subordinates. Shi Yunzi scratched his head and said, I'm not afraid of them doing anything, but I'm afraid that those fellows from the Great Light Temple will do it for real and let Chu Xiu watch the show. Mako Mori also sighed and said, after all, it was us who killed someone. This matter will depend on the Great Light Temple's attitude. At the moment, in the Great Light Temple, Mako Mori had a deep understanding of the Great Light Temple. Shi Yunzi could maintain his rationality, but it did not mean that others could. The Chunyang Dao sect was the first to kill their disciple. If there was no explanation for this, no one would be able to tolerate it. Therefore, even if Shi Yunzi wanted to investigate the matter thoroughly before taking action, he had no choice but to be dragged into trouble with the Chunyang Dao sect. Shi Yunzi called back all the people who were searching for the disciple outside. The Vajra school gathered together and went to the Chunyang Dao sect's northern Yen branch to cause trouble for them. As the Chunyang Dao sect was personally called over by Xiang Long, the northern Yen branch was also prepared by Xiang Long. It was at the east side of the city, and everything around it had been emptied and given to the Chunyang Dao sect. At the moment, the group of Great Light Temple's disciples had already surrounded the Chunyang Dao sect's branch. Shi Yunzi walked out with a smile and said, I say, everyone, who are you trying to scare by making such a big fuss? Can't you just talk things out nicely? Shi Yunzi said expressionlessly, of course we can talk things out nicely. Chu Xiu is right about one thing. A life for a life, and a debt must be repaid. Hand over the person who killed the Great Light Temple's disciple, and we'll settle this. Shi Yunzi raised his brows slightly. They would not even hand over an ordinary Chunyang Dao sect disciple, let alone a disciple like Yi Shao, whom they valued greatly. If they were to hand over the person, it would disappoint the disciples. For a large sect like the Chunyang Dao sect, it was fine for them to be stubborn, but it was impossible for them to admit defeat. Shi Yunzi shook his head and sighed. Master Shi Yunzi, this is where you're wrong. You must know that monks are compassionate. Don't you Buddhist sects emphasize on repenting and becoming a Buddha? Now that this disciple of our Chunyang Dao sect has decided to repent, can't we just let this matter go? Shi Yunzi remained expressionless as he said, repenting? Fine, send him to the Great Light Temple. We'll help him transcend his murderous intent and help him become a Buddha. Shi Yunzi frowned and said, is there really no way to discuss this? Shi Yunzi said coldly, do it. As soon as he said that, the group of Great Light Temple's disciples charged toward the Chunyang Dao sect. This time, the Chunyang Dao sect had really infuriated them. After all, although Chu Xiu had also killed someone previously, the person he killed was not an official disciple of the Great Light Temple. Although Buddha said that all living beings were equal, it was clear that regardless of whether it was Shi Yunzi or the other people from the Great Light Temple, their cultivation had not reached the level where all living beings were equal. Therefore, it was a completely different concept for outsiders to be killed and their own people to be killed. Shi Yunzi was helpless and could only let the people from the Chunyang Dao sect take action and resist together. In terms of numbers, the Chunyang Dao sect side was at a disadvantage. Fortunately, the people that the Chunyang Dao sect had brought were not weak either. Mako Mori single-handedly held off the two Jing cohort monks from the Great Light Temple. Meanwhile, Shi Yunzi relied on the pure Yang divine weapon in his hands to fight against Shi Yunzi. He did not have to worry about being defeated for the time being. However, the other warriors from the Chunyang Dao sect were not so optimistic. They had fewer people to begin with, and their abilities did not exceed the warriors from the Great Light Temple by too much. Therefore, they were suppressed right away. At that moment, Yi Shao was in the branch, and some of the other newly accepted disciples from the Chunyang Dao sect were also there. With their abilities, they would be sending themselves to their deaths if they went out. At that moment, Yi Shao's eyes narrowed, and he was about to go out with his sword. Daoist Xian Yi, who was in charge of protecting them, quickly said, Ancestor, what are you going to do now? Previously, when Yi Shao killed someone, because he was the one leading the team, he was considered to have not been able to supervise him. However, he was scolded by Shi Yunzi, and after that, he was scolded by Mako Mori. He was very depressed. Yi Shao pointed outside and said, "The other brothers are still fighting hard outside, and you want me to drag out an ignoble existence here?" Daoist Xian Yi said helplessly, "But with your current abilities, it's useless even if you go out." Yi Shao shook his head and said, "They're useless, but I'm useful. Senior, since I've joined the Chunyang Dao sect, that means I'm a member of the Chunyang Dao sect. Looking at the others fighting with their lives on the outside, but I turn a blind eye here. I'm sorry, I can't do that." "Can you do that, senior?" Daoist Xian Yi gritted his teeth and said, "Of course, I can't do that either." Yi Shao waved his hand. "If that's the case, then let's fight our way out together. The other juniors can't help, so let them stay here." After saying that, Yi Shao walked out directly. When Daoist Xian Yi saw this, he could only grit his teeth and follow him. The outside was already in a mess, but Yi Shao looked around subconsciously. After the incident, he passed the news to Chu Xiu through the Jianghu Hall spies in Yanjing City. Chu Xiu only replied with one sentence, which was to find a chance to escape, and that Chu Xiu was secretly helping him. But where was Chu Xiu now? Everyone was fighting fiercely. How could Chu Xiu take him away in public? Or should he find a chance to escape himself? However, at this moment, Yi Shao was targeted by someone. It was a young monk with a bare upper body. His whole body was muscular, and his chest, back, and arms were engraved with Buddha's prints that were emitting a dazzling brilliance. After seeing Yi Shao, the monk immediately recognized that Yi Shao was the person who killed Yan Guang. Without saying a word, he directly punched Yi Shao. Yi Shao and Daoist Xian Yi noticed this fluctuation at the same time. Both of them blocked with their swords almost at the same time, but they were blown away by the other party's punch. Daoist Xian Yi exclaimed, "Oh no! It's Prince Xiaoming, Yan Shi." The other party was another young martial artist from the Great Light Temple who entered the Longhu list after Prince Xiaoming, Zhong Xian, stepped into the real pellet state. Because the other party's martial arts were extremely similar to Zhong Xian's, they both walked the path of extreme physical strength, and even their style of doing things was somewhat similar. Therefore, he was also called Prince Xiaoming by the people of the martial arts world. This person had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm. Yi Shao and Daoist Xian Yi couldn't stop him at all. However, at this moment, a subtle voice suddenly sounded in Yi Shao's ear. "Lead him to the edge of the battlefield." Chapter 947. On a tall building a few miles away from the battlefield between Chunyang Dao sect and Great Guangming Temple, Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, Mu Zi, Pang Hu and several other high-level members of Jianghu Hall were there. At this distance, they could clearly see everything that happened on the battlefield with their eyesight. The voice transmission in Yi Zhao's ear just now was said by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu and the others were going overboard at this time. They even ordered some fruits and snacks as if they were watching a show, watching the fight between Taoism and Buddhism. While Tangya and Pang Hu were drinking, they were still commenting on whose move was good, whose move was terrible, etc. Mei Qinglian said at the side, "I didn't expect that kid to be able to provoke Taoism and Buddhism so quickly. He's a genius." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Luck plays a big role. The person he killed happened to be a disciple that Great Guangming Temple valued very much. So, he only killed one person and it completely angered Great Guangming Temple. However, most things in this world only look at the result, not the process. Luck itself is a part of one's strength." Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "You mean Lu Fengxian?" Chu Xiu's expression was a little strange. He said, "Brother Lu is not just lucky. It's simply a blessing. However, Yi Zhao's luck is also good." Lu Fengxian was also in northern Yan at this time, but he did not stay in Jianghu Hall. Instead, he chose to bring Shui Wuxiang and the others to the far north wilderness to cultivate. The majority of people, including Chu Xiu and the others, believed that LV Fengxian's luck was very good. In fact, it was so good that it was as if the heavens were looking after her. Tangya was even betting with others that LV Fengxian would certainly be able to find some ancient remains or treasures in the northern wilderness. However, if Lu Fengxian really relied on luck, he would not have been able to cultivate to his current level, and he would not have the combat power he had now. In fact, when it came to cultivation, Lu Fengxian was no worse than anyone else. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "If you say that LV Fengxian's luck is good, I can believe it, but I don't see how Yi Zhao's luck is good. If his luck was good, why would he be sent by you to carry out such a dangerous mission?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Meeting me back then was the greatest fortune in his life." Mei Qinglian was speechless as she watched Chu Xiu acting cool. But thinking about it carefully, what Chu Xiu said seemed to be right. If Yi Zhao had not met Chu Xiu, he would have been bullied and humiliated in the Yi family. It was because he accidentally obtained the blood soul pearl that Chu Xiu's remnant soul was placed in, that he was able to turn things around. Although Chu Xiu was not very reliable, at the very least, he had turned Yi Zhao's life upside down. Hey, that kid seems to be in danger. Mei Qinglian suddenly pointed in the direction of the battlefield. Yi Zhao was indeed unable to hold on any longer. In Chu Xiu's view, the strength of that Prince Xiaoming, Yan Shi was far inferior to Zhong Xian. When Chu Xiu was at the unity of heaven and man realm, he had fought with Zhong Xian more than once or twice. In Chu Xiu's view, this Yan Shi's strength was at most only 30% of Zhong Xian's when they were at the same level, and this was an overestimation. In Chu Xiu's generation, there were many evildoers on the Longhu list. When it came to the next generation, they seemed to be much more mediocre. But in fact, it was not the next generation that was mediocre. People like Yan Shi were at the normal level of strength on the Longhu list. It could only be said that in Chu Xiu's generation, they were all evildoers. After all, Yi Zhao was a level lower than Yan Shi. Even if there was Daoist Xian Yi, their strength was still too far apart. After a dozen moves, he was already in danger. Chu Xiu suddenly said to Mei Qinglian, "Can your beauty technique forcibly reverse a person's memory? It only needs 3 breaths of time." Mei Qinglian nodded and said, "You want me to attack that Yan Shi? With his strength, even if he practiced Buddhist martial arts, it would be easy. But the problem is, as long as I get close, I will definitely be noticed by that old Taoist Mako Mori and the old monk of the great Guangming temple. At that time, once they know Yi Zhao's identity, they will immediately understand everything. Then, they will directly turn their spears and join forces to deal with you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There's no need to get close. Just make your move here." Mei Qinglian widened her eyes and said, "Who do you think I am? I'm not a god. This is a distance of several miles. You want me to use the beauty technique to influence a person from several miles away? I can't even extend my spiritual power that far, let alone the great chick technique." Chu Xiu pointed to himself and said, "What if you include me? Don't forget, I have also practiced the secret spiritual technique." Mei Qinglian hesitated and said, "Then try it." "I can't be too sure. Give me your hand and only transfer the purest spiritual energy to me. Don't add any auxiliary power. You are stronger than me. The impact of spiritual energy is not a good feeling. If you hurt me, I will not let you off." Chu Xiu reached out and held Mei Qinglian's white and tender hand. This scene made Mu Zi very unhappy. She secretly stared at Mei Qinglian. How infuriating. But at this time, she was also helpless. She had not practiced the primordial spirit secret technique, so she could not help young Master Chu. An extremely pure spiritual force was transmitted into Mei Qinglian's body. Even if it was a martial skill or aura qi, its power would be greatly reduced at this distance. Not to mention the extremely powerful spiritual force, but at the same time, it was also a very fragile existence. But fortunately, Chu Xiu's spiritual energy was really strong enough to allow Mei Qinglian's spiritual energy to extend to the edge of the battlefield. At this time, Yi Xiao could not hold on any longer. Even the long sword in his hand was shattered by Yan Shi's punch. At this time, Mei Qinglian's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xiao's ear. "Run! Start running now. You only have 3 types of time. Within 3 breaths, you have to disappear from the sight of these 2 people." Yi Xiao was stunned. But at the next moment, Yan Shi and Daoist Xian Yi were stunned. A trace of light flashed in their eyes. Yi Xiao could tell that this was Mei Qinglian's voice. At this time, he could not care about anything else. He directly ignited the blood in his body and burst forth with his strongest speed. In 2 breaths, he had already flashed hundreds of feet and disappeared into the corner of the street. But at this time, in the minds of Yan Shi and Daoist Xian Yi, another scene appeared. Yan Shi's hand formed the Bright King Seal. The power of the Bright King Seal actually had some of the charm of the Uncle Master Zhong Xian that he worshipped. When the seal landed, it actually blasted Yi Xiao into a cloud of blood mist. Daoist Xian Yi's mouth was wide open. His face was filled with disbelief. When the 3 breaths' time was up, Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian could not hold on any longer. They immediately retracted their spiritual power. Both of their faces were pale and they panted at the same time. These 3 breaths' worth of illusions did not allow Yan Shi and Daoist Xian Yi to notice anything wrong. Yan Shi only looked at his own hands in surprise. When did his Bright King Seal improve so much? While Yan Shi was stunned, Daoist Xian Yi took the opportunity to run. He ran to the center of the battlefield and shouted, "Uncle Master! Yi Xiao has been killed by Yan Shi from the Temple of Great Light." Shi Yunzi and Meiko Mori were stunned. Meiko Mori trembled and said, "Isn't Yi Xiao staying in the branch? How did he die at Yan Shi's hands?" Daoist Xian Yi shrunk his neck and said, "It was junior brother Yi Xiao who insisted on coming out to fight to the death. He said that his senior and junior brothers were all fighting to the death outside, and he could not live in peace inside. In the end, the moment we came out, we were targeted by Yan Shi from the Temple of Great Light." At this time, Yan Shi also returned to where Su Yan and the others were. He said in a low voice, "I've already killed the murderer who killed junior brother Yan Guang." With Yan Shi's confirmation, this matter was already settled. This time, the ones who were seething with anger were the people from the Chunyang Dao sect. Their Chunyang Dao sect was already short of manpower. Their desire for the next generation of disciples was much stronger than that of the Temple of Great Light. The Temple of Great Light had lost Yan Guang, and there was still Prince Xiaoming Yan Shi. However, it was not easy for them to find Yi Xiao. In the end, not even a few days had passed, and he was killed. How could they continue? Just now, it was the Temple of Great Light who wanted to find trouble with the Chunyang Dao sect. However, this time, it was the Chunyang Dao sect who charged at the Temple of Great Light relentlessly. That crazy drive did not have the slightest bit of the elegance and naturalness of the Daoists. When Chu Xiu, who was watching the battle from a distant building, saw this scene, he could not help but shake his head and said, "TSK, this bunch of Daoists are quite agitated when they go crazy. They are even more brutal than when they attacked me last time. Luckily, I was far away this time, or else I would have been covered in blood." Chu Xiu was still making sarcastic remarks here. At this time, Yi Xiao had already walked up the stairs with a pale face. He bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "Master, I'm lucky that I didn't disappoint you." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "This time, you completed your task well. It should be said that you are quite surprised. You even completed it better than I imagined. The 3 positions that I promised you before, now you can choose at will." Yi Xiao did not even think about it and said directly, "I am willing to stay in the Jianghu Hall." In fact, Yi Xiao had already thought about these three positions very clearly before. The Guanzhong torture room was a place of defense. As long as there was no war between the three countries, the Guanzhong torture room would always be very peaceful. It was a place for retirement. Even if Chu Xiu gave him the position of the head of the four torturers, it would be meaningless. He was still young and had the opportunity to climb further. One of the dragon heads of the Blue Dragon Society was tempting enough, but Yi Xiao also remembered what Chu Xiu said. Killing was just a means, not an end. He had enough training in the Blue Dragon Society. After learning how to kill, he did not want to continue to stay in the Blue Dragon Society. Therefore, the most attractive position for him was the Jianghu Hall. The Jianghu Hall could be said to be a force that Chu Xiu had truly created. Similarly, Chu Xiu also had many strong people under him. There was Mei Qinglian from the Yin Demon faction, Tang Ye and Yan Bugui from the Blue Dragon Society, and Pang Hu, who used to be one of the 36 northern bandits. Staying in the Jianghu Hall, the competition would definitely be amazing, but there were also more possibilities in the future. Chapter 948. Yi Xiao's choice was within Chu Xiu's expectations. Although the competition in the Jianghu Hall was high, there were also the most opportunities. However, Yi Xiao still needed to temporarily hide his appearance and identity, at least for the time being. Otherwise, if the Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple knew that they had been fooled, they would definitely go crazy. Of course, the Chunyang Dao sect and the Great Light Temple were still going crazy, and they were fighting fiercely. Meiko Mori was still strong despite his old age. He managed to severely injure the two Jing generation monks of the Great Light Temple by himself. However, Shi Yunzi was at a disadvantage. With the pure Yang divine weapon, Shi Yunzi's strength was enough to fight against ordinary martial artists in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, the problem was that Su Yan was not normal. He was the first seat of the Great Light Temple's martial arts academy. Even though he had only just entered the true fire spiritual refinement realm, his abilities were not something an ordinary martial artist could compare to. Therefore, Shi Yunzi had suffered quite a bit of damage. In general, the Chunyang Dao sect was at a disadvantage in this battle. After all, they had fewer people. After this battle, both sides were in a situation where both sides were heavily injured. Basically, no one could cause trouble for Chu Xiu anymore, unless the Temple of Great Light or the pure Yang Taoist sect sent another group of people to northern Yen. However, such a situation was not very possible. A branch was ultimately a branch. The two lineages of Taoism and Buddhism did not come to northern Yen to fight to the death with Chu Xiu, nor did they come to fight to the death with Chu Xiu. For the sake of a branch, they had to bet the might of the entire sect and go all out. The leaders of Taoism and Buddhism would not be so impulsive. The Taoist and Buddhist sects finally calmed down, and Chu Xiu finally heaved a sigh of relief. The Great Light Temple and the Chunyang Dao sect were just small troubles caused by Xiang Long. The real trouble was still the ownership of the throne after Xiang Long's death. With Xiang Chang's character, if he were to ascend to the throne, Chu Xiu would inevitably fall out with him. Although he might not lose, if he were to fight against the Northern Yen court, the foundation of Chu Xiu's Jianghu Hall would be completely destroyed. In the Northern Yen Imperial Palace, Xiang Long was at the end of his rope. Previously, Xiang Long could still stand with the help of others, but in the past month, it was difficult for him to even stand up. Xiang Chong stood by Xiang Long's bed with a complicated expression on his face. It was true that he deeply hated Xiang Long, but Xiang Long was still his elder brother. Xiang Chong's heart ached when he saw Xiang Long looking as if he was going to die at any moment. Xiang Long lay on the bed and asked weakly, "What's the situation outside now?" His eyes stared straight at the ceiling. In fact, Xiang Long's eyes could no longer see anything. Xiang Chong said, the Jianghu Hall and the Taoist and Buddhist lineages have been in constant conflict with each other. The Taoist and Buddhist lineages had just had a big battle. It was a relatively fierce conflict, and both sides suffered losses. What about the Jianghu Hall? Xiang Chong said, the Taoist and Buddhist lineages had a fierce battle because of their disciples. The Jianghu Hall did not participate in it. What a pity. Xiang Long sighed. If the Jianghu Hall could also participate in it, it would be perfect if all three sides suffered losses in the end. By the way, how is Xiang Chong now? Although Xiang Long said to the outside world that he had no selfish motives in making Xiang Chong the crown prince, he loved Xiang Chong the most among all the princes. If it were not for Xiang Chong's age, he would have become the crown prince long ago. Therefore, even if Xiang Long could not hold on any longer, he still wanted to protect his chosen successor one last time. Xiang Chong hesitated for a moment and said, "He's fine. The power under his command has now far surpassed Xiang Li. It's just that his desire for power is too strong, and he likes to use Jianghu people." Xiang Chong had already beautified Xiang Chong's actions countless times before saying this. Looking at Xiang Long's state, it was obvious that he would not live for long. Asking Xiang Long to replace the crown prince at this time was not a good thing for the Northern Yan. It could easily cause unrest in the Northern Yan court. Moreover, looking at Xiang Long's state, Xiang Chong could not bear to say too many bad things about Xiang Chong. Therefore, when Xiang Long heard this, he only smiled weakly and said, "Desire for power? A person without a strong desire for power cannot become an emperor. As for using Jianghu people, this is not a bad thing. Didn't I also use Jianghu people? The Jianghu and the court are not clear. Instead of rejecting and suppressing them, it is better to make use of them. Chong is still too young and may not be able to do well in some areas. Therefore, he still needs the elders of the Northern Yan royal family to help him." Xiang Chong nodded with a slightly dark expression. He was too embarrassed to tell Xiang Chong that he could not control his son. Last time, he had gone to teach him a lesson, but Xiang Chong had turned a deaf ear to it, clearly not taking it to heart. At this time, Xiang Chong was indeed a little too full of himself. With so many experts under his command, he did not think that he needed the help of these so-called elders like Xiang Chong. Why did they not come to help him when he was not the crown prince? In contrast to Xiang Chong's arrogance, his subordinate Lin Fengyu was very anxious. The stronger Xiang Chong's subordinates were, the more anxious he became. This was because Taoist Wuyang had brought these powers to Xiang Chong, and he was being valued less and less. Previously, Lin Fengyu and Taoist Wuyang had been regarded as the crown prince's right-hand man. But now, the gap between the two was becoming more and more obvious. Even outsiders could see this. After all, Taoist Wuyang was the one who had brought so many experts to Xiang Chong's side. He had also helped Xiang Chong solve quite a few troublesome problems. As for Lin Fengyu, besides a woman who lived off women, what else did he have? He was simply a good-for-nothing. This situation made Lin Fengyu, who had always been motivated to follow Xiang Chong to achieve great things and become a minister, very anxious. Seeing Lin Fengyu's appearance, Li Jiaodi could not help but say in a gentle voice, "Yulong, don't worry about these things. You're just a dog of the imperial court. Don't be one. Follow me back to the Hidden Devil clan. At worst, I'll personally beg Wei Shuya, Qin Chaoxian, and the others to let you establish a sect in the Hidden Devil clan. When the time comes, wouldn't it be great to be the sect master yourself?" If other members of the Hidden Devil clan saw Li Jiaodi's appearance, their eyeballs would definitely pop out of their sockets. Among the Hidden Devil clan, Li Jiaodi was definitely the most dislikable one. For example, Yuan Tianfang, who had been killed by Chu Xiu, was also extreme and dislikable. But at least in a situation where there was no conflict of interest, Yuan Tianfang would not provoke others. But Li Jiaodi was famous for her sharp and unkind words. Even if it was a normal conversation, she could cause a bellyful of anger. But everyone knew her character. It was not worth it to be serious with her. But if you endured it, you would still be angry in your heart. So in this way, not many people were willing to deal with her. No one had seen such a gentle way of speaking from Li Jiaodi. It was enough to show how great the power of love was. Lin Fengyu said somewhat impatiently, "What do you know? Those who are below 1 and above tens of thousands are not the dogs of the imperial court, but the nobles. If I go to the Hidden Devil clan as a local rat, I might be targeted and annihilated by those righteous sections. I won't go." After saying that, Lin Fengyu also felt that his words were a bit harsh. He quickly changed his tone and said, "I didn't mean that. It's just that I've been with His Highness for so many years. In the end, when His Highness is about to ascend the throne, I'm going to be kicked out. I'm unwilling." At this point, Lin Fengyu suddenly raised his head and said, "Say, if I help His Highness seize a part of the power of the Jianghu Hall, will His Highness be happy? I've heard His Highness scolding Chu Xiu for not knowing how to appreciate favors." Lin Fengyu did not do this on a whim. He relied on his own scheming to deduce this. The existence of the Jianghu Hall was first feared by Xiang Long. Then, Chu Xiu rejected Xiang Chang's recruitment. This Chu Xiu had clearly parted ways with the Xiang royal family. Of course, he did not have the ability to destroy the Jianghu Hall, nor did he dare to think about it. But it was still possible to take advantage of the battle between the Daoist, Buddhist, and demon branches to take advantage of the Jianghu Hall. The main thing was to gain Xiang Chang's favor. Li Jiaodi's expression changed slightly. She said in a slightly serious tone, "Yulong, if you go and provoke others, I can help you block them. But don't provoke Chu Xiu." Li Jiaodi had been in Jianghu for a long time. Most of the time, she was a big shot in the Yinma branch. She was treated respectfully by many of the younger disciples of the Yinma branch. Therefore, Li Jiaodi was very arrogant and fearless. In the Yinma branch, Li Jiaodi had never been afraid of Wei Shuya, who was extremely senior, or Ren Qianxiu, who held the phaseless demon sect, a first-rate demon path power. But the last time in the ancestral land of the Black Sky demon sect, Li Jiaodi was really afraid. She was not afraid of being beaten by Chu Xiu. She was afraid of Chu Xiu's attitude. That kind of attitude where he had no scruples and really dared to kill her. Previously, Li Jiaodi had offended many people because of her foul mouth. But no matter who it was, no one had any killing intent towards her. But the last time in the Black Sky demon sect, she was sure that Chu Xiu really dared to kill her and was really prepared to kill her. If Li Jiaodi did not have the secret technique of the Red Lotus Demon Lord, Red Lotus Escape, she might have already died in the hands of Chu Xiu. Therefore, in Li Jiaodi's view, Chu Xiu was an out-and-out madman. He did not care what status you had or what scruples you had. He would directly kill you first. Facing such a person, you either had to kill him or not provoke him. It could be said that if it was not because of Lin Fengyu, the power of love was too great. Li Jiaodi did not want to appear in front of Chu Xiu again in this life. Hearing Li Jiaodi's words, a strange look flashed in Lin Fengyu's eyes. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know the severity of the matter. I will not easily provoke that guy Chu Xiu." Li Jiaodi nodded with a peace of mind. Unfortunately, she did not know that a man's promise was often the most unreliable. She had suffered losses when she was young, but now, she still did not learn from it. Chapter 949. As a devil in the eyes of most people in Jianghu, in their eyes, Chu Xiu must have raped, looted, killed, and enjoyed bloodthirsty killing. In fact, with Chu Xiu's current status, even if he really wanted to rape and loot, he had a large group of people to do it for him. He had no time to do such low-level things. During this time, Chu Xiu was very busy. He was so busy that he did not even have time to practice. both Taoism and Buddhism had been solved. Chu Xiu was also seizing the time to make arrangements. The strength of all parties must be adjusted to perfection without any flaws. There was only one chance. If Xiangli was not promoted to the throne, all his arrangements and forces in the northern Yan land would be abandoned. Therefore, during this period of time, not only was Chu Xiu setting up these things, but he was also deducing the various situations and accidents that would occur when Xiang Chong ascended the throne. Then, he would think about how to resolve these accidents and strive to not leave any loopholes. However, man proposes, God disposes. It should be said that Chu Xiu did not expect that someone would come to trouble him at this time. A disciple of Jianghu Hall rushed in and shouted, "Bad news! Lord Fire Slave is besieged and is in danger." Everyone in Jianghu Hall was there. When they heard the news, everyone was stunned. Recently, Jianghu Hall had been withdrawing their forces from the northern Jianghu back to Yanjing City. At this time, who else would come? It should be said, who dared to come to trouble them? Chu Xiu walked out with a gloomy face and said coldly, "Don't panic. What the hell is going on? Who besieged the Fire Slave? Where is he now?" "It's Lin Fengyu, the Crown Prince's subordinate. He is at the west side of the city." Previously, several gangs in the West City respected our Jianghu Hall, but I don't know what's wrong with Lin Fengyu. He wanted to confiscate the offerings of those gangs. Those gangs were usually respectful to our Jianghu Hall. When something happened, they informed Lord Fire Slave in time. As a result, Lord Fire Slave fought with the other side after a few words. But the other party has the advantage in numbers. When I came to report, Lord Fire Slave was already in danger. Hearing this, Mei Qinglian and the others had a strange look on their faces. Did Xiang Chong's brain get squeezed by a door? Why did he come to provoke the Jianghu Hall at this time? The Jianghu Hall governed the northern Jianghu. Some small gangs in Yanjing City were naturally under the jurisdiction of the Jianghu Hall. However, these gangs were generally very weak. After all, they were at the foot of the world. They could only do some despicable things. Even the suppression hall did not put them in their eyes. If Xiang Chong's subordinates really provoked the Jianghu Hall for a little bit of tribute, then their brains would be squeezed by the door. However, if Xiang Chong wanted to target the Jianghu Hall, he would not be unable to wait for such a short time since he was about to ascend the throne, right? Moreover, Daoist Wuyang was by Xiang Chong's side at the moment. If Xiang Chong wanted to attack the subduing martial hall, why didn't he send any news? Could it be that Daoist Wuyang had betrayed him? No one could have guessed that Lin Fengyu had done this boldly behind Xiang Chong's back. Not to mention Daoist Wuyang, even Li Jiaodi did not know. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said coldly, "Who cares what the reason is? Does he really think that he can touch the people of the Jianghu Hall whenever he wants? If Xiang Chong did not provoke him, he would naturally not provoke Xiang Chong either. Anyway, it was not long before he ascended the throne. The day when the real intention was revealed was coming. But now, Xiang Chong dared to openly provoke the Jianghu Hall. In such a situation, Chu Xiu could not tolerate it, and he had no way to tolerate it. At this time, on the long street in the west of the city, the Fire Slave was fighting 1 against 5. He was covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. Although Lin Fengyu's position in Xiang Chong's heart had declined greatly, he still had Li Jiaodi behind him. He was also Xiang Chong's confidant. Therefore, in the Crown Prince's palace, he had a lot of confidants. These 5 people were all martial artists of the Unity of Nature realm that he recruited from the underworld, but he did not expect that an unknown guy from the Jianghu Hall would be so difficult to deal with. Facing the siege of the 5 people, Fire Slave clenched his teeth and dodged with his strange martial skills with a strong Western region style. When he couldn't dodge, he had to fight with his opponents. Of course, he couldn't defeat them in the end. Things had reached such a dangerous level, but the Fire Slave still did not think about escaping. If he escaped, he would not only lose his face, but also the face of the Jianghu Hall. This place was Yanjing City, and so many people were watching. He couldn't afford to lose his face. If he lost his face, he might lose his life and future. In fact, the fire slave was a very contented person. He was a slave in the western regions, and his life was extremely rough. For him, he was already very satisfied as long as he could live and eat and drink. So even if Yan Bugui and Tangya, who were his colleagues in the past, had stepped into the real pellet state, and they had become the confidants of official Chu, he had nothing to be jealous of. But no matter how contented he was reluctant to give up everything he had now. Some things were fine if he couldn't get them, but once he got them, he didn't want to lose them again. Official Chu didn't want useless subordinates. Although the fire slave was not as good as Tangya or Yan Bugui, he was not useless. The qi and blood around the fire slave was constantly burning. The martial artists who fought with him were all stunned. Isn't it just a normal conflict? Why is this guy risking his life? The fire slave wanted to fight desperately, but they didn't, so they were forced back by the fire slave for a while. But burning blood essence couldn't last long, and the fire slave himself was getting weaker and weaker. Feeling the power in his body getting weaker and weaker, the fire slave smiled helplessly. Talent was the most helpless thing. If it were Tangya and Yan Bugui in this situation, they would have killed them all long ago, and he could only struggle to hold on. He was actually a person who was very afraid of death. If one were to say that he was loyal to Chu Xiu, he would not be loyal to the extent that he would be willing to die for him. But today, he did not know why, but he was determined to fight to the death here. However, he had already fought to the death, and there was no chance for regret. Just as the fire slave was about to fight to the death, a breeze suddenly flashed. The 5 people in front of the fire slave stood there at the same time. The next moment, a black dot appeared on the forehead of the 5 people. In an instant, the black dot spread, and the 5 people turned into a pile of flying ash in the breeze. This scene scared the people on Lin Fengyu's side. The fire slave suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on his mouth. Being alive was better than being dead. A strong force was sent into his body, and Chu Xiu's voice came from behind him. Your courage is commendable, but you are very stupid. Next time you encounter such a situation, come back to ask for help first, and then kill his family. The fire slave smiled bitterly and scratched his head. The owner of the tavern cheated me. I'm afraid he drank too much fake wine. Chu Xiu waved his hand and asked someone to take the fire slave away for Feng Buping to treat. The next moment, when he turned his head to Lin Fengyu suddenly had a feeling that he was looking at death. It was a kind of fear that was close to the bottom of his heart, and even his legs couldn't help but tremble. Lin Fengyu hadn't seen Chu Xiu before. It should be said that with his previous status, he wasn't even qualified to see Chu Xiu. The name Chu Xiu was just a legend to him. But today, when he saw Chu Xiu, he finally understood why Li Jiaodi told him not to provoke Chu Xiu. Even though Chu Xiu hadn't said a word, he was already feeling regretful. At this moment, Chu Xiu was also sizing up Lin Fengyu. Seeing him like this, Chu Xiu roughly understood that this idiot must have come looking for trouble on his own. He had wrongly accused Daoist Wu Wang, but Daoist Wu Wang probably didn't even know about this. Although Xiang Chong was a little arrogant, no matter how arrogant he was, he wouldn't be so arrogant that he would come looking for trouble with Chu Xiu at this time. However, Chu Xiu was very puzzled. Why would Li Jiaodi take a fancy to this kind of trash? Could it be because of his face? The moment he saw Lin Fengyu, Chu Xiu no longer had the desire to investigate further. He didn't even have the mood to talk nonsense with this kind of trash. Just as Chu Xiu was about to kill Lin Fengyu, Li Jiaodi's figure had yet to appear, but her voice came from afar. Chu Xiu. Let Yulan go this time. Let him go this time, I'll agree to anything you want. Li Jiaoti's figure appeared at the corner of the street. At this moment, her face was full of anxiety and panic. Obviously, she was afraid that Chu Xiu would really kill Lin Fengyu. She didn't know that Lin Fengyu had acted on his own this time. If she had known, she would have stopped him with all her might. Chu Xiu even dared to kill her, a fellow Hidden Devil clan elder. To Chu Xiu, Xiang Chong, who was behind Lin Fengyu, wouldn't have the slightest scruple. Therefore, after hearing the news, she rushed over immediately. Fortunately, Chu Xiu hadn't made his move yet, so there was still a chance. For Lin Fengyu, Li Jiaoti was willing to give up many things. Even if she had a grudge against Chu Xiu, she, who had never begged anyone in her life, didn't hesitate to ask Chu Xiu for help. Even if Chu Xiu asked her to obey his orders from now on, Li Jiaoti would agree. At this moment, Chu Xiu's movements paused slightly, which made Li Jiaoti's eyes suddenly full of expectation. But then, Chu Xiu snapped his fingers, and the qi of heaven and earth trembled violently. The next moment, Lin Fengyu's chest exploded directly. He fell to the ground with a look of disbelief in his eyes. The fire slave was fighting for the reputation of Jianghu Hall. If he didn't kill Lin Fengyu, how would other people of Jianghu Hall look at him, Chu Xiu? Moreover, Chu Xiu wasn't interested in the conditions that Li Jiaoti had offered. To put it in a somewhat arrogant way, Chu Xiu didn't care about ordinary true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists. What he cared more about was ability and loyalty. Even if Li Jiaoti was willing to surrender to Chu Xiu at this time, Chu Xiu didn't want to use her. Chapter 950. Li Jiaoti had already descended into madness after witnessing the man she loved being killed right in front of her eyes. She had already realized that she was no match for Chu Xiu when she had fought with the Black Sky Demon cult previously. However, she was still charging towards Chu Xiu in a frenzy. A red lotus mark bloomed on her forehead, and her entire body was enveloped in a layer of dazzling fire-like stellar energy. It was extremely dazzling and resplendent, as if it could burn everything in the world. However, within it, there was a trace of vitality. It was a power that could purify everything, as if it could purify everything in the world into the purest form of vitality. Red Lotus Hellfire. It's the purest form of Red Lotus Hellfire. Lu Jianghe, who had not spoken for a long time, had a look of disbelief on his face. He sounded as if he had just swallowed a fly. This woman had actually used the Red Lotus Hellfire that only the Red Lotus Demon Lord had been able to control in the past. He could not accept this. Moreover, he did not understand. This woman had clearly used her own qi and blood to barely ignite the power of the Hellfire to activate the Red Lotus Hellfire. Now, it was just the death of a lover. How could she directly control the Red Lotus Hellfire? Chu Xiu did not say anything. He took a step forward, and half of his body was enveloped in Buddhist light, while the other half was enveloped in the strange apocalyptic fire. The Red Lotus Hellfire surprised Chu Xiu. The four great demon lords of the Kunlun demon sect were truly extraordinary. The power that this Red Lotus demon lord possessed was somewhat similar to the world annihilation flames of the Mahakala demon sect. It was a kind of power that existed between life and death. The Red Lotus Hellfire could burn away all evil in the world, but in that barren land, there was still endless vitality blooming. It was destruction, but it was also rebirth. However, what surprised Chu Xiu was that this power did not belong to Li Jiaoti. Even though she had used the Red Lotus Hellfire, she was not qualified to be looked at by Chu Xiu. Amidst the endless Buddhist light and black flames, a strange Dharma form appeared. On the left was a Buddha with a majestic Dharma form. The one on the right was a demon, its demonic flames overflowing the heavens. The Buddha on the left made a mudra with one hand and pressed Li Jiaoti to the ground. However, the Red Lotus Hellfire continued to burn fiercely. Li Jiaodi was a cultivator at the true fire spiritual refinement realm, but her attacks were completely out of control. She only knew how to use all her strength to burn the red lotus hellfire, and one of the Buddha's hands began to melt. However, at this moment, the demon lord Dharma idol on the right also slammed down with a seal. Boundless destructive flames descended, soaking in the power of nirvanic extermination and burning. The black and red flames intertwined together, igniting an extremely magnificent color. That was the color of death. No one knew which was stronger between the apocalyptic flames of the great black sky demon cult and the karmic fire of the red lotus that belonged to the red lotus demon lord. However, there was no strong or weak in martial arts, but there were strong and weak people. Li Jiaodi's strength was weaker than Chu Xiu's. Under the suppression of the Buddha's Madra, the power of the apocalyptic flames slowly stripped away the red lotus hellfire around Li Jiaodi. At this moment, Li Jiaodi screamed, and a bloody mist bloomed around her. Under the burning of the karmic fire of the red lotus, it turned into a blood sword. It tore apart Chu Xiu's evil demon Buddha Dharma form and stabbed towards him. Against this attack, Chu Xiu only stretched out a finger. His inner true fire burned continuously on his finger, and there was even a crimson color moving rhythmically in Chu Xiu's hand. Under Chu Xiu's finger, Li Jiaodi's blood sword had already started to crumble before it could even stab down. In front of me, using the power of blood qi is futile. As soon as he said that, Chu Xiu took a step forward and appeared in front of Li Jiaodi in an instant. Golden and silver inner true fire bloomed around him, and at the same time, there was also the pitch-black apocalyptic flames. With the two types of flames combined, it was an extremely destructive power that was unstoppable and unavoidable. With a loud bang, Li Jiaodi was sent flying by Chu Xiu's punch. In an instant, a bloody mist dispersed, and a large amount of fresh blood flowed out of her mouth. With the strength of Chu Xiu's physical body, there were only a handful of people in the pugilistic world who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Tangya, who was standing at the back, grinned. Official Chu really doesn't know how to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. Even hitting a woman so viciously. Mei Qinglian turned to look at him. Tender feelings for the fairer sex? If you were to make a move on that woman, she would kill you 10 times in a quarter of an hour. Moreover, does that kind of old woman deserve to be pitied? Tangya shrugged. Like repels like. He wisely did not continue to discuss this issue with Mei Qinglian. In fact, there was one thing that Tangya was right about. Chu Xiu really did not know how to have tender feelings for the fairer sex. To be precise, in his eyes, there was a distinction between men and women. But when it came to a fierce battle, in his eyes, there were only those who could be killed and those who could not be killed. Why would there be any distinction between men and women? This woman, Li Jiaodi, had caused trouble for him more than once or twice. Even if she was a member of the Yinma clan, she was the kind of person who was useless and would only hold him back. So if he did not kill her now, could it be that he would keep her alive for the new year? After punching Li Jiaodi until she vomited blood, Chu Xiu took another step forward and appeared in front of Li Jiaodi in the blink of an eye. Li Jiaodi's body was covered in blood, but at this time, she was staring at Chu Xiu. There was no longer any hatred in her eyes, and it had even turned pitch black. However, a scarlet flame bloomed in her pitch black eyes. The hellfire of the red lotus could burn all sins in the world. The hellfire of the red lotus that bloomed from Li Jiaodi's eyes did not have a physical body, but in an instant, it began to burn in Chu Xiu's mind, roasting his primordial spirit. In the next moment, countless vengeful spirits that Chu Xiu had killed appeared, tearing at his primordial spirit. But at this time, Chu Xiu seemed to be unable to feel it. He sneered, "The hellfire of condemnation? What a joke! Who in this world has the right to judge me for my sins? The hellfire of the red lotus could burn all sins in the world. If an ordinary person's primordial spirit was roasted like this, they would probably have long gone mad." But there was clearly something wrong with Chu Xiu's current worldview. To him, he did not feel that what he had done was sinful at all. There might be good and evil in this world, but there was no good or evil in Chu Xiu's heart. The hellfire of condemnation could not punish him for his sins. He pointed a finger at the top of Li Jiaoti's head. In an instant, Li Jiaoti's body trembled. The endless hellfire of the Red Lotus began to devour her, burning her into a pile of ash in an instant. The power of the hellfire of the Red Lotus was evil and domineering, but the most important thing was the cultivation of one's state of mind. Li Jiaoti was a stubborn person. Given her personality, she actually dared to call herself the successor of the Red Lotus Demon Venerable. 500 years ago, the Red Lotus Demon Venerable would not even have looked at her. Seeing that Li Jiaoti had been killed, Mei Qinglian walked over and shook her head gently. This Li Jiaoti is actually also a pitiful person. She was trapped by the tribulations of relationships when she was young, resulting in her stubborn personality. Everyone thought that she had already broken free from the tribulations of relationships, but in reality, she had never walked out of it. Just look at Lin Fengyu's character. The reason Li Jiaoti fell in love with him and was willing to die for him was because she thought of him as someone else, a person that she could never obtain in this lifetime. The word love trapped her entire life. Even though she died at your hands, in reality, she died because of the word love. Tangya, who was at the side, glanced at Mei Qinglian, not daring to speak. Just now, you were still looking down on Li Jiaoti, but now that she's dead, you're sympathizing with her? TSK, as expected of the saintess of the demonic path. How hypocritical. Chu Xiu clapped his hands and said, "That's why I say that the 7 emotions and 6 desires of love are the most troublesome." Mei Qinglian tilted her head and looked at Chu Xiu. "Oh? So you're preparing to cultivate the heartless Tao?" Chu Xiu shook his head. How can it be easy to forget emotions? Moreover, if you lose the 7 emotions and 6 desires, you're not a human, but a god. It's a very extravagant thing to let a person maintain their rationality forever. Mei Qinglian said, "That's true, but you killed Li Jiaoti, so the trouble is not small. It's not the trouble on Xiang Chang's side, but the trouble in the Yinma clan. Although Li Jiaoti is not likable, she is still a big shot of the Yinma clan. You've killed her now, but you've gone too far. It's hard to guarantee that no one will come looking for trouble with you. It was forbidden to kill each other in the Yinma clan. Although this was just a slogan, there were still some open and secret fights in the dark. However, no one brought this matter to the surface. The number of Yinma clan warriors who died in the hands of Chu Xiu was not 1 or 2, but Li Jiaoti was the first one. Actually, strictly speaking, Yuan Tianfang, who was killed by Chu Xiu and Su Du last time, was the first one. However, at that time, Chu Xiu gave the credit for killing Yuan Tianfang to Su Du, and this time, Chu Xiu killed someone in public. Even if he wanted to frame him, he didn't have the chance. Chu Xiu waved his hand indifferently and said, "Looking for trouble with me? I want to see who dares to look for trouble with me today." Chu Xiu was not arrogant and ignorant, but he had enough confidence. Among the Yinma clan, Wei Shuya and the Phaseless Demon sect were definitely people who could stand on his side. Even if they were dissatisfied with Qin Chaoxian's Scarlet Drill Demon sect and some rogue cultivators, would they dare to take the risk of falling out with Chu Xiu to look for trouble with him? As for those who didn't like Chu Xiu didn't need to care about them. It was fine if they didn't come, but if they did, he would kill them together. Now, it was no longer the time for Chu Xiu to need the Yinma clan. It should be said that the Yinma clan needed him, Chu Xiu. Those who were willing to cooperate with him and help him were seniors worthy of respect. Chu Xiu was also willing to give them face. But for those who couldn't see the situation clearly, who cared who they were? Just as Chu Xiu finished killing and was about to let people clean up the place, Xiang Chong also received the news and hurried over with Daoist Wu Wang and the others. Although he had many experts under him, Lin Fengyu was still his confidant. Li Jiaodi was also a genuine true fire spirit refinement realm expert, so he couldn't ignore her. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.